No. I'd like to call the Duval Committee of the Whole workshop for February 4th, 2025 to order at 5:30 p.m. And first item is, does anyone have anything for the good of the order? Oh, sorry, Jennifer.
I guess maybe it was a couple weeks ago. I'm not sure. I had forwarded Becky Wilson, who's the president of Toll Brothers, the memo that we all had in our packet the last time, and it was sort of the staff response of how we could utilize the affordable housing sales tax, and there was a little bit of a summary, and so I forwarded it to Becky, like I said, who's the president of Toll Brothers HOA, and she came back with kind of a question, and it implied, in addition to for a specific question, it was kind of also a little bit of an implied, like, when is this going to happen, where the council might discuss how we're going to spend our affordable housing sales tax. And I forwarded it to administration, and I'm not sure exactly, if there's been a response or if we have any idea of timing for having a conversation. I know we have a ton on our plate, and I kind of feel like we probably have more on our plate than we can get done maybe this year, but I wanted to be able to provide her with kind of reasonable expectations of when we might start talking about it. And along those same lines, I don't think there's any, when I say talk about how we spend the affordable housing sales tax, it's not that we would definitely, choose to spend it on the request that she had, but just kind of create an overall plan of how we're spending it. And so I don't know when we're going to have that kind of overall conversation, or if there are any deadlines on the affordable housing sales tax. Like, if you don't use it within a couple years, you lose it. So anyway, I was just kind of curious about when that might happen, just so that we can, provide that feedback and expectation.
So I'm going to turn to Director Thomas on whether or not there's a deadline. I'll answer the overall question, which is, if council would like something put on the council agenda for discussion or decision, that goes to the mayor pro tem. And then every Thursday we meet city administration and mayor pro tem to set the council agenda. So I don't set the agenda for council. It really goes through mayor pro tem, and then together we look at what council would like to have on the agenda, and then we can put it in the agenda for when city administration thinks that we can have the time to do it.
Okay. Sometimes staff in the background has an idea of wanting to bring something to council, so I wasn't sure if there was already a plan of staff wanting to bring it forward in a certain time frame. So.
And then Director Thomas, the one piece there is, like, I also wasn't sure whether it was going to be part of the housing element, because there's some other pieces there, but I think the broader question here was just if there's a deadline. I know a lot of times it can just be, for lack of a better word, invested, held. There's some other things I know in terms of third-party agencies that administer, but just in terms of where that fits into the schedule, that I'm happy to bring it into the agenda, but I also don't want to bring something forward that isn't queued up for action by staff.
I think we can definitely bring forward a conversation before we do the policy work. The tax revenue is collected for 10 years by statute. There is nothing that says we have to give it back. But the program is a 10-year program, and we are 5 years into it, and we don't have a program to spend it. But what I will say about the Toll Brothers issue is that HOA dues there will not ever qualify, because it has to be 60% AMI or below. So I think that's easy to reach back out to Toll Brothers, and if council wants and the city administration is okay, somebody can forward it to me, and I can work with Cynthia to do that response. Cynthia and I have talked about this as well, and we don't have an affordable housing program to allocate in general or to manage. So it would be more likely that we would partner with a nonprofit, unless we're looking at different levels of commitment in staffing.
Anything else? One other thing I'll add, I appreciate this sort of some of the feedback I got around the summit, sort of that's on me. I'm struggling a little bit with dates. So I will coordinate with John tomorrow. Probably you were out and then I was sort of committed to get a poll out. And so we're still looking at March. It may be toward the end of March. And I know that starts to bump up against spring breaks and other things. So we'll just need to coordinate as a group and find a time that works, but look for that. And ask, even though sort of I've been flagging and getting it out there, to respond as soon as possible so we can start to work with staff in terms of the content for that. So next is the review of the regular meeting agenda. Did anyone have any concerns or items that needed to be, it's a fairly light agenda this week, but any concerns or comments? I think consent agenda is just the approval of minutes and the payroll this month. So. Yes.
For the main meeting, I was wanted to ask that we add, I don't know if that would be to the consent, just excusing Councilmember Isaacson from our last meeting because he was ill.
Noted, and we've sort of discussed, because he's here this time, it's not an issue because it's not too consecutive, but we could still make a note of that because I know you were, I think, I'm trying to remember if you were out too. Oh, you were out, yeah. So yeah, this didn't get communicated, but we did talk online. So appreciate you bringing that up.
Thanks.
And then with that, sounds like nothing that we need to adjust or add. So with that, we'll move into the discussion items. The first item is up with Director Thomas for the future land use map and zoning map.
Good evening, council and members of the community. This evening, we're going to talk about the future land use map. I'm not sure if there's any way to put it on this screen instead. If not, that's okay. Okay, no, that's okay. We have been talking for several months just about our future land use map, which will then lead into our zoning map that we'll also adopt when we adopt our comprehensive plan later this year. And I wanted to go through just kind of a map exercise so we can talk about the differences between the land use map and a zoning map. Not that there's any confusion, but we do have like new planning commissioners, so we wanted to make sure they had a really good base understanding. So we thought we would do the same thing with the city council as well, because we are making some changes to our future land use map, not for the purpose of upzoning or rezoning, but to place our residential into 2 land uses within our community. So I want to talk about that. Plus, we're also taking our manufactured home parks and taking them out of residential 6 units per acre and creating its own zoning and land use map category. Next slide. So when you look and compare a future land use map, obviously a land use map is created in concert with your comprehensive plan update. It depicts amount and type of development the community expects to see in the future. And in general, it's like the next 10 years of your community. But we look out beyond too, because we have like, Vision 2050 through PSRC. So we kind of look at it a little bit longer as just the 10-year period as well. And that document or map then informs a zoning map and provides a pathway for our zoning regulations, which are in chapter 14, which is essentially our zoning and development regulations. On the zoning map, that is very specific and is created as individual zoning designations. And so an example, where on a future land use map, you might have a commercial designation, but then when you go to the zoning map, you'll see mixed use zoning designation and commercial designation. So you'll have 2 uses in the land use map, but only, 1 use in the land use map and 2 in the zoning map. It is a regulatory document, so we have to follow that zoning map. We don't get to just say, oh, it's close enough to R8, so we're gonna let something come in at R8. if it's in an R6 zone. And it really is, for the most part, just an implementation document. And it's pretty easy to look at for our community. Like, we share our zoning map a lot when we're at the front counter, whether it's City Hall or down at the permit center. Next slide. So you can see we're giving you a couple examples that aren't necessarily just from Duval, so that you can see kind of what other cities are doing. We're all pretty similar. So over on the left, you have a future land use map, and you can see that it's a small snapshot or inset from the zoning map, which is on the right-hand side. So you can see purple is considered the town center. So then when you go over to the right and you look at the zoning map, you can see all the different zoning designations that they have that are different shades of purple. And then that gives you more specific direction that you would then have in your development and zoning regulations, and honestly, even our public works development regulations. And then it matches up also with like our transportation and utility, stormwater, sewer, all of those items as well. So that is kind of the land that we're starting to go into, where we're not creating a land use map that looks exactly like the zoning map. So we're starting to, to grow a little bit and have it look more consistent with other communities. Next slide. So here you go. Here is our future land use map, although we use the 2021 map just as an example, because this is how we are doing it now. And so you'll see where the commercial land use map is, and it's the blue with the white dots. But then go and take a look over to the right, and you see the zoning map, which is mixed use, commercial, and mixed use institutional. That's the only zone and land use right now that we're utilizing that is common with the other cities. The rest of them match exactly between the zoning map and the land use map. Next slide. So what is different in this update? So I did a couple of notes so that you could look at that. So we are adding our new parks from the residential, or MUI, to our parks open space. So that technically is a rezone, but when we had our last update in 15, we didn't have those parks. They weren't constructed. They are now, so you want to then zone them appropriately, because if you keep them R6, we can't manage them in the same way if they were residentially zoned. The new FLUME consolidates residential into two categories. And this is probably our biggest change. We're taking what we call residential traditional, which is 4 to 8 units per acre on the land use map. Then when you go over and you look at the zoning map, you'll still see R4, 4.5, R6, and R8. So we're not changing, rezoning anything. We're just compartmentalizing in our land use map what is more traditional residential. Then we have compact residential, and that's our higher zoning designation. So like R12 and R20. So we don't have a lot of R12 and 20, but you'll see in the little outset there where those areas. We are adding the new zone called manufactured home park, which is really coming full circle, because in 2004, if anybody can remember that far back, or if you lived here, we had that zone and land use designation. And then we decided in 2005 to zone them R6. I don't really know 100% of the history on the decision-making, but what we've heard and seen is that our manufactured home parks can be under threat for transition and for redeveloping. And we worked with, actually, the mobile home park just in back of council or in front of council if you're on this side, and we worked with them to create a co-op, and they bought the property from a previous owner, so it's permanently protected that particular neighborhood. And we have a couple more in the city, and under our housing action plan, that was one of those policies, was to look and protect some of our more affordable housing. So that's what we're doing also out of this. So that would be one of those exceptions where we really are rezoning something. I think that was the end of the slide, but I can take some questions.
In this case, when you say rezoning, it's more like not changing necessarily the density or anything. It's just kind of changing the definition within the zoning that's already there. Like the park, for example, it was in residential because it was in the developmental phase of it. Now we're transitioning to what it was always planned to be, and just more detailed accuracy within the zoning map.
Yes, and to keep even add on that, back in the last comp plan update of 2015, all of our parks and infrastructure were under public facilities. And at that time, that's when we stretched that out and put parks just in parks and open space, and then kept our public facilities like this as a public facility versus a park into two different categories.
In your example, I think it was Montlake Terrace. That was really interesting to look at something completely different than us. They have special development districts, and I was curious, and I saw one is a residential. Is that just a name to encapsulate if they have a specific thing they eventually want to see there? So one curiosity I had is for urban growth areas in our area. If we're going to be short on like affordable housing units, are you allowed to designate that as a special development district and say this is affordable housing? And then, because I know there's some overlap with the GMA numbers, that we have a certain number of housing, but I mean you can overlap affordable housing units within that, or are they separate? So sorry, kind of like three questions there.
That's okay. No, so I actually had a conversation with Oscar several months ago, because I'm like, hey, can we just like label an area for affordable housing? And he's like, no, you can't do that. Like literally that, it was kind of that matter of fact. But he said, what you can do is utilize the tools that are available to you, which is like concomitant rezone conditions, development agreement conditions, pre-annexation conditions. I don't know where like that, I'll call it that sweet spot of risk is, like how much you can kind of push to the affordable housing, and that's a conversation, that we definitely need to have if we have to look at bringing in more residential area.
Yeah.
Most of the time, like when you see the one that Montlake Terrace has done, a lot of time that was like worked out in the beginning as kind of like a sub area plan, and then neighborhoods within that sub area.
Mike, can I do a quick follow-up, or did I already use up mine?
Yeah, I think you can, and then
I just
Robert Applin.
I really wanted to quickly say that I feel like in general, I think we're all feeling these big developments, and it's only a few units here and there. We're never going to hit those affordable numbers. And so just feeling more of that pressure to do something bigger, for affordable housing, but I don't know.
Yeah, so this really ties into the land use portion that we'll talk about later. But there's a whole section called urban growth area and annexation policies. And some of the statements talk about, like I'll just read one, require a comprehensive analysis to ensure potential annexations will sufficiently contribute to, well, actually it's revised a little bit, but it talks about, ensuring that it funds services prior to approval. And then there's another one saying, does it meet growth targets and accommodate deeply affordable housing, things like that. So is that what you're like, where you would want us to focus?
Yeah,
if we can't do a zoning. Yeah, if we can't specifically zone it, just say, hey, we don't have any need to annex land just for general market rate housing. So land needs to be annexed. It needs to have affordable homes, like have that right in our comprehensive plan.
Yes. The challenge though is you can't require all affordable housing. It's going to be a portion of market rate.
Yeah, that concerns me. I was talking to someone, I think it's the mill site in Snoqualmie, and they were feeling very excited. I think they got 20%, which if you need 600 affordable units and only 20% can be that, multiply the 600 times, let me do the math, 4. And that's how many market rate homes you will get in order to get, I mean, we don't need another 3,000 homes or whatever of market rate homes. So I think that this is a bit concerning that if that's our mechanism, that is going to end up allowing an incredible amount of market rate homes that we don't need. If that makes sense.
It definitely makes sense, but I'm not the state policymakers. And so what we're trying to do is just bring forward our opportunities and our options. And I think it would be helpful if we could, require more affordable housing, but there's some constitutional law related to that, and we're going to end up with both potentially. And then we're going to have to look, do we have the capacity for sewer, water, all of those things if we're doing 20% affordable, and then that other portion
is
market rate. We're going to have to be really careful.
I have a follow-up on that. I remember a couple council sessions ago, we were talking, it was after everybody attended the whole dam thing. And, we were talking about, is there any way to get our concerns for, our residents that are here now out of the valley, put that to the state, as a consideration. We don't have transportation in place for affordable housing. We don't have roads in place. Say we get those 600 whatever units, that's potentially 1,200 more people or more, that it would be on us if they get stuck out here and hurt. And how does,
Yeah, we've anticipated for quite a while that our kind of population cap, because of our existing plant, is about 12,000, and we're just under 9,000 right now. I did attend, along with Cynthia and several members of our team, the Toll dam drill, and it's challenging because we have just flooding in general. Even if the dam stays fully intact, which we all hope it does, we're always going to flood. We're going to be very challenged by getting in and out of the valley. And I don't think that will change in the near term. Maybe if we're lucky in the mid and long term, where you'll start to see more infrastructure for roads. And, I don't have a special badge to go to the legislature and say, hey, by the way, these are all the reasons why at least Duval can't do this. That best comes from council being in Olympia, and also our consultants advocating for those things. And I am just sometimes the implementer and the messenger.
Your councilman questions?
So what happens, if we don't meet affordable housing projections or requirements or desirements? We don't have the zoning, we as a city council and a city determine we don't think it's appropriate to annex enough property with a 20% rate of affordable housing because of all the infrastructure and all these reasons that are obviously I think we all agree with. What happens if we as a city just say we're not going to annex just to meet those numbers, because there's all these other things that we would be failing our citizens at even more so. So we're putting affordable housing ahead of everybody. Not that any of us are against affordable housing. We don't want to do everything we can help, but we've got to govern from that perspective as well as a city.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit at the and we can talk offline about that just in general. But my role really is to take the legislation, bring it back, try to figure out how to make it all work. And the city has the opportunity to say no, but there could be consequences to that.
City Administrator?
Annexation is an option, but it is not the only option. And so I think it's really important to differentiate between the comprehensive plan, the goals and the requirements of the comprehensive plan. The implementation comes after, and we've talked a lot about annexation. That certainly is one of the options and a strong option that is being put on the table, because it's obvious in terms of land requirements, but it's not the only option. And so I want to make sure that as we're thinking about the comprehensive plan, we're thinking about the plan itself and not necessarily going immediately to implementation and, I guess catastrophizing the worst case scenario, which would be to annex without.
Yeah, and just to sort of bring that back to the land use maps, I mean, I think that's one of the tools that, in terms of how you designate for the future use and then how that translates. So whether it's increasing density, redevelopment, other things. So those are some of the other tools I think you were alluded to. My question was really just to call out, I think one of the striking things as you look at the Mountain Lake Terrace map versus the Duval map is like the limited number of, taking this down to crayon conversation, but the limited number of colors on their maps, and then on the future land use map, and then how it gets much more granular in terms of the zoning map. I know Duval has had much more of a patchwork. They look much more similar, and I think some of the changes you talked about in terms of consolidating the residential zones into larger blocks. I was just curious if that was representation or how to interpret that in terms of like a larger, municipality that has a simpler land use map, and then sort of a smaller district where we have a much more complex, if there's sort of pros or cons, either one of those approach, just trying to think about how to interpret it.
I don't think there's necessarily pros or cons. It's really just a community decision making process. And we actually do have quite a few zoning districts from R4 to R20. For a small city, we're pretty complex. Kind of going back to what City Administrator McNabb said, annexations do not happen overnight. It can take a generation to like build out certain areas. And I think one thing that we would be looking at to have those affordable housing units come in, and we're also short jobs, so we do need to figure out something over this next decade, is if you really want to figure out that affordable housing, you can just do it stacked over the commercial retail. And that's going to take longer to build out because it's not like your typical market, but it would be easier to staff them because it is compact. You wouldn't have to bring as much area possibly in. So I think there's a lot of opportunities when we do look at what we're going to do, as part of implementation of the comp plan.
And then just one follow-up question, just more around status. I know in the past we had some non-conforming properties and we rationalized and made adjustments. Are there any areas that we still need to think of further as once these are more sort of just reclassifications, but all the non-conforming parcels have been corrected or brought in?
We've got them pretty nailed down. I mean, there's always going to be legally non-conforming lots, but we're not making any more as part of this one. I would say that with the legislative changes and potential upcoming legislative changes is that our residential units from like R4 to R12 really will start to kind of blend together because of accessory dwelling units, unit lot subdivision, those types of things. And so I think we'll have to watch that as that starts to happen. You can't make more protective code for those types of uses. That's been prohibited by statute. And so you have your typical drivers, which are your impervious surface, your FAR, and setbacks. And then even setbacks don't always apply under new statute that we're going to be working on to implement, which is that unit lot subdivision, where the mother unit or the parent unit is the only one that has to meet setbacks and the others do not. So there's a lot of changes that are going to be coming. I honestly would be more worried about that at this point too, and not just our affordable housing units, because I think that's going to change the landscape of our community more in the near and midterm.
I'm sure I know you came in a little late and we're discussing the land use map. If you have any questions that you want to ask staff.
No specific questions. Laura spent some time with me at the not workshop.
Transportation
Public
open
hearing,
house.
yeah. And so she explained a lot of good stuff to me there, so I have a much better understanding now. On your last statement though, Laura, what did you say was of more concern for you?
I think it's the other statutes that have come to be where we have to now implement them, and then items the legislature is now looking at. They're very focused on affordable housing at all levels, especially that 0 to 60%. And so we're starting to see requirements. Obviously we'll be able to put 2 ADUs, on parcels beginning July 1st. But we also have to look at unit lot subdivision by the end of the year, which is really just taking what we call a parent parcel and subdividing it and not having to meet the traditional standards of that. So that is going to change, the way our community looks. And our most susceptible areas will be where we have infill development. So they'll be downtown and some of our larger lots. Maybe even some of our, older neighborhoods where they have 1/2 acre and 1 acre lots, where you'll then be able to put 3 other units and potentially ADUs. So there's a lot of change that's happening all in a really short period of time. And we have co-housing as well. The good thing is that it is affordable housing and you can get credit for that. So I think that is probably one thing that will really help us and help the workers within our valley.
Councilmember Neplin?
Yeah, I just had one from the conversation I had with the person from Snoqualmie. To achieve that 20% affordable, to negotiate that, they had to go to, I believe, 55 feet high, which currently I think we're at about 35, 3 stories. So, I mean, that would be very different than what we're used to here. And so in order to even reach 20%, it was a huge compromise in.
I would say that was their choice. You don't have to make that choice.
Well, right. I guess what I'm saying is that 20%, if we don't negotiate to that level, would we even get 20%? That's my concern.
I think if we put a policy together, if we ever have those annexation areas, you say it's 20% of the units, you aren't forced to then say we're going to allow 50 feet. That was a policy choice by them.
I guess I'm trying to figure out where is the point that you're crossing the line into, would 50% be reasonable? You're saying 100% you aren't allowed. Where legally is that line?
I don't know the answer to that, and we'll have to explore that further.
Interesting. Thanks.
Does an ADU qualify as affordable housing?
No.
Why?
They're not, for the purpose of counting it right now. They're not.
And I've noticed, I think Kirkland, if you drive around there and there's developers that buy multiple contiguous lots and then tear down the single family homes and build an apartment complex or something like that. Is there anything like that in the works here in Duval?
We don't have that experience yet, but kind of to go back to the ADU, I think eventually they will be considered affordable housing units, but the way most cities' policies work right now, a lot of them are short-term rentals, or they're being used in other, in another way. But when we do our ADU policy, we'll no longer require the occupant owner to be in any one of the units, and they can be rented out. So I think we'll start to see them become affordable housing units, but my guess is the state and the county want to see some metrics on it over the next decade.
And I would assume, ADUs come in different flavors, interior, exterior, fully built out as many, tiny homes versus, workspaces. So I think that's the other part that sort of still needs to mature, is how we define it as or how the state, I guess, defines an ADU as a housing unit as well. So any other questions? I'm sorry, Councilmember Schaefer.
Not so much a question, I guess a comment and opinion related to Mike's concern there. As the state implements more of these higher density regulations, not only ADUs, but as Laura referred to, taking parent lots and subdividing those into child lots, which are, my understanding from the RCWs is those are fully autonomous lots, just like a lot. You own it, except it's a small, small lot. Well, you can imagine what developers are thinking, right? Well, we can go in and buy this 1/4 acre lot and put up however many, dwellings on this by subdividing this lot into mini lots. And so the answer, I think, to your question is, yeah, that's a concern. Absolutely a concern. And there's no reason, Laura corrects me, there's no reason it can't and will happen here in Duval. Is that?
I think we're gonna see what happens. I mean, a lot of times you'll have new laws, but sometimes it can take years for that to start to happen. It depends on the price of land and the economy. There's just
but
a
there's
lot
nothing
of,
preventing
no.
a developer can invest that way, bulldoze an existing home and put up a bunch of smaller residences.
It's conforming within the.
Yep.
They wouldn't be able to bulldoze the home because that's still the parent lot, but like if it were like say an acre and they had the parent home on there, they could get 3 more homes on there. But it does take a while sometimes to see, when you implement, that's why we check in every 10 years, because we want to like check in. What did those new policies, how did they contribute to our community? And were there any impacts? ADUs we've allowed in Duval for as long as I've been here, attached, detached. We have pretty stringent regulations on them, and we're going to have to amend them because we have to pull back a couple of things. But we don't have a lot of ADUs. Like we're seeing maybe 1 or 2 a year. And we went, probably 5 or 6 years with not seeing any. So it really just depends on, where the economy goes. It's driven by that and the cost of housing.
I would just sort of add one thing. I mean, I live on one of those larger lots, Rick, and at the time it's built, Laura's told me this in the past, like, it wouldn't have been approved to be built out today because there's a lot of wetland. So I think that's the other thing is some of the larger parcels we do have, the regulations have changed around setback. So what may have seemed viable, there's actually significantly less buildable area. That's not obviously everywhere, but I think that may not alleviate all your concerns, but I think some of the larger parcels have other constraints that would be on the economic, that sort of, at least will hold that down a little bit. So I know we have one other topic. Has everyone else had a chance to ask questions? And
you can continue.
Okay, I know. Otherwise, we're moving over to reports because, as I said, fairly light agenda. But yeah, any other questions? Or we have Laura here.
And I would add, we are going to be talking about the land use element this evening, and so you'll get an opportunity, to have those discussions here too. I'm really glad that we had this expanded conversation because it helps us, to draft policies as we move forward. But we have a good 5 months, to continue to work and figure it out.
Councilmember Neflin?
Yeah, if we have more time available, I do have a question about, you were saying ADUs can't be counted as affordable. I had another question about some other things of whether they're counting as affordable, but I don't know if now is an appropriate time or later.
I'm good. If I don't know the answer, I will write it down too.
So when I look in that portion of the plan, I was trying to get more information about where those numbers came from and how it was determined, but I was told that I couldn't get that information unless I had permission from the rest of council. So I kind of had to do some digging myself. I don't know if I'm looking at the right information, but I'm trying to understand what went into the numbers. It says that we have 0 available land for I think they call it compact housing. And when I look at our existing inside city limits, I see some R12 and R20 that's still vacant. And I also see that we have a significant amount of commercial that could potentially build residential above commercial if they wanted to. So I'm just trying to understand why it shows that we have zero capacity inside city limits for any of those below 80% in the plan. So I guess I just understand why existing inside city limits R12 and R20 and commercially zoned areas aren't counting as land available for possible affordable units. Doesn't mean it has to actually get built and we have a plan of someone who's willing to build affordable. It just means it's available. Does that make sense?
Yes. And so we are in the process of preparing a technical memorandum for our land use capacity analysis. So council will receive that as part of the comprehensive plan update, and we can walk through some of those items in that plan.
Okay, so when it refers to things being in like Appendix B or the land use capacity analysis, that is forthcoming.
Yes, that's forthcoming. We're doing it as part because we needed it for our transportation plan, for our housing element, and our land use capacity analysis.
Okay, so would you expect that the existing land that's inside city limits that's still R12, R20 and commercial could count towards our affordable?
I don't want to answer the question right now because I don't have information in front of me, but we'll get back to you on that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
One other comment, if I may, thanks. I know we perceive this as being shoved down our throats, or at least I do. But I do think the council should be aware there are legal avenues to pursue. Nothing circumventing or disobeying the law. But there are possible alternatives. And I'm certainly not saying any of those alternatives are easy. Some of them are somewhat drastic, but they are allowed under state law. And the primary alternative I'm aware of would get us under or away from the requirements of the GMA. It would also get us away from the requirements of the county, King County. So just keep in the back of your minds, there are alternatives. I see some head shaking, but I have read the RCWs on this. Go ahead.
So I'm not disagreeing that the RCW says what it says. I did spend most of my time with Oscar. I meet with him every Thursday morning and talking about our options for legally fighting the numbers that some members of council, find unpopular. So it isn't that you can't do it. It isn't that you can't pursue legal options. It is extraordinarily expensive, and other states other cities are already doing it. So again, independent of whether or not you need to pass a comprehensive plan, you need to pass a comprehensive plan. The ability to fight the numbers, get amendments, all of those things are separate from whether or not you need to pass a comprehensive plan. And other cities are on their way already in petitioning and seeking reconciliation. As somebody who is part of the financial management of the city, it is not prudent for us to spend, this is according to our city attorney, the money necessary to fight the fight when much bigger cities are already beginning that process, and we could then join their efforts after they've kind of,
Yeah, and just to sort of add, I sort of made a comment similar to this at the last meeting, but I think it's the same way as, you need to think of the deadlines which we need to do to submit the comprehensive plan, but that is a 10-year, that is a long-term plan. So the time in which we put that out there, and as Laura has attested, it's a living document, it gets reworked, the things change. I think for me, sometimes, there'd be more benefit of, whether it's action days and sort of lobbying on behalf of the city, or bringing in a legislator to the city and walking them, up 124th and out to the dam. And because that's really what's going to, I think, move the dial, not necessarily the litigation, but I do think it's also prudent to keep an eye and be aware of what other cities are doing to the right time to engage, but not, I sort of want to echo your comment a little bit, but not necessarily make that investment until sort of we would need to do it.
One other follow-up comment by me.
You may, unless we've gone around any, yeah.
Okay, the other alternative, which hasn't been mentioned, but I was alluding to, that's fairly drastic, is becoming our own county. That is allowed by state law. It takes a majority vote of people. It's relatively drastic because now we would be the city and county of Duval. By the way, I come from a city where this was done. The city of Broomfield in Colorado was a city, and we voted to get ourselves away from the requirements that Boulder County was forcing on us, and we did that, and we became our own county. So there is precedence, at least in other states. It could be done here in Washington. The GMA requirements only apply to counties of over 50,000 population. The King County requirements, since we would not be part of King County, would no longer apply to us. So I'm not suggesting we pursue that. So don't get me wrong. I'm suggesting we be aware of that possibility and keep it in our back pockets if that's something the council would like to pursue.
Mayor?
Interesting thought, but I do want to point out that it still takes an act of the legislature to create a new county. It's not just votes, it's an act of the legislature. It has to be agreed to by both houses and signed by the governor. Additionally, if you think we have budget problems now, becoming our own county would exacerbate that extensively. Then we would be responsible for all of our human services and required services. We'd be responsible for developing our own court system. We'd be responsible for all of our own law enforcement. We'd be responsible for all of our own jails and a plethora of other items. I think regardless of whether it's possible in state law, we are not at the edge of the county. So redistricting, boundary review boards, et cetera, are not likely to be favorable of that in Washington state. There have been many attempts to create new counties in Washington state over the last 20 years in the legislature that I've been involved in. Not a single one of them has gotten past the hearing stage. I think that's something to be aware of, is that also as a county, to even think about it, the responsibility would probably require, even for our small population, at least 500 employees to manage, not to mention the infrastructure to do it. And there's absolutely no way we could tax our way into providing that level of service. Even if we were getting the county sales tax, because then you wouldn't have a city sales tax. So the revenue stream would not grow in the manner that some might think it would. So I just wanted to share that information.
Yeah, I'm not sure all of those concerns apply. The RCW I read did not say anything about legislative approval. It requires a majority vote of the population that wants to become so. As far as school districts, those don't change. Fire districts, those don't change. We'd still be paying taxes just as we are today to those items. We would not be redistricting schools or fire districts or any of that. Nor did that happen in my home county back in Colorado either. So it may not be quite as dire as one thinks it is.
So, Council?
I love the clarification because it's like, it goes back to the question I asked. I didn't really get an answer. No, it's an easy answer, and that is what happens if we don't do it, right? So, and I'm not saying we can't just thumb our nose and say we're not going to do it, not follow regulation, statute, and all this thing, but at a minimum, I think as a city or what have you, let me, instead of making a statement, I'll ask a question. Can we at least push back and say, we do not think as a city we should do this population growth or whatever it is in large scheme, and make it, get it documented that what we're concerned about, the dam, for example, how we're going to get all of our citizens out if we grow to the capacity that we need to meet these numbers. We are not doing our citizens a service and put him in an unsafe development. Because fast forward, what I would like to document somehow, if we don't think we should do that, is if that dam breaks, everyone's going to hindsight 2020, and I think would be our city's responsibility, at least document that we don't think we should grow to whatever capacity our infrastructure can't support, or we cannot evacuate our citizens, because they're going to come back and they're going to say, however many people die from it. Why did they not get out of town? Well, because we didn't have the ability to get them out. Well, why were you that big? Well, because the state told us to, and we didn't tell them we shouldn't. We just said, okay, we're going to blindly do what you tell us to do because we don't know, or we didn't do what we should have back against it. I mean, there is an avenue to at least document that, right?
We can
Yeah, do you want to respond? Because I think we do push back.
We push back and have pushed back for 20 years on policy. Unfortunately, there's been very few of us as elected officials from the city that have been willing to go down and advocate it. So we've been, over the last 20 years, there's been 2 or 3 of us total. And it takes decades of building relationships to break through. I would say, Laura can confirm, Director Thomas can confirm this, but nothing except our police station is in an inundation zone for the dam break. All of our businesses and residences are out of that zone.
The one mobile home unit.
You're right, correct. One, so it's a very small portion, and those folks can evacuate in less than 5 minutes. And we have a couple of hours. Unlike Carnation, there are several hours for folks to either cross 124th and Woodinville and get out of here, or hunker down until the floodwaters recede. So I think that's really important to note. But we do, in fact, raise our voices on a regular basis and go to our state legislators and people that are not our state legislators and have historically, those of us that have lobbied, share the story about how things are not working in non-contiguous UGA cities like ours. That has gone on deaf ears. And there is more legislation coming forth that is even more challenging. But the bottom line is that none of these things will change unless everybody from every city starts talking to their state legislators. And even then, we're probably at this point too far gone in some of the regulations to move back. Unfortunately, we do have some members of the state legislature that are very determined and refuse to listen to any cities at all on our concerns. And that is the position we're in. But because our city and other cities don't have extensive relationships beyond a couple of people with state legislators in general, we can't go to another state, go to a group of other state legislators and make an impact because those relationships have to be built over time and years. And that is a huge deficit for communities like ours that have not been able to get the elected bodies to put that work in. So that's pretty blunt, but it's the reality of having been in Olympia and working in that space for 20 years.
Follow up to that. Again, I'm not being accusatory.
No, I'm just sharing information.
People are trying to say, again, I say, what happens if we go and say we cannot do that? How do we document? We are not. It's one thing to go to meetings and have these arguments and develop. It's another thing to say we went through our comprehensive plan. I know that eventually we're probably forced to, but how do we say this is a comprehensive plan we recommend based on everything? We're not going to put these parts in because of safety or whatever. And then if they come back and say, then what?
So again, I think we need to separate the consequences for not passing a comprehensive plan, which is we are not eligible for state roads, for highways, like a lot of things we pay for, we can get paid for if we don't pass a comprehensive plan. That is different than the penalties for not annexing in 30 years or not building affordable housing. It's really important to separate the two. We don't know yet all the penalties for not complying with brand new state regulations because they haven't been litigated or tested. So we do know the consequences of not passing a comprehensive plan. We will no longer get state funding. The consequences of not meeting some of these targets, it's a crystal ball right now. We don't know. Yeah.
And hopefully maybe that was your question you were asking before, is what happens if we don't do the short-term commitment and then the longer term things. I think that's where you have the opportunity to negotiate, on a per commitment basis, but it's, yes, Director Thomas.
It goes back to this reconciliation process that other communities are in the process of doing, but they adopted their plans and now they're going through a reconciliation process. So we would adopt our plans, create the policies for us to meet our targets and our goals, and then watch to see what happens with some of these other communities. And then if it's favorable, then we would jump back in at some point, in maybe say in the next 5 years, and go back and then tell our story and try to shave some of that off.
Councilman Knappman?
Yeah, I am just looking at our agenda further, and we're talking about the introduction chapter. I wonder if in the introduction chapter of the comprehensive plan, if we can make a very clear statement that we think it's irresponsible to continue growing to meet these targets, or to take away our parking requirements, or do all these things, that we think that it's irresponsible for our community, and make a very clear statement that we're going to file this plan, but there are serious flaws. And, you know, there might be a law that we have to do one thing, but honestly, the entire concept of the comprehensive plan was that we would have and plan for infrastructure. And if we know that the county isn't going to fix our roads, and we're going to be trapped in here when it floods and all of these other things, and we know the county has told us they're not doing it and they aren't planning for it, I think we need to make a very clear statement that, you know, we'll do this because you're telling us we have to, but we think that we are actually violating other requirements of the comprehensive plan by passing this. Because there are requirements that we have appropriate infrastructure. And I think if we're concerned that we don't, we should make it very clear right in the introduction. Just straight up right at the beginning.
Director Howes, I don't know if that's something you want to respond to here, or you want to wait till the council meeting. Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor.
I just had a point of clarification. Comprehensive plans are not based on what the county and the state roads do. They're only based on what's within your borders. And that's one of the things we've been talking about getting changed at the state legislative level on transportation planning for years. So a statement like that would not be a truthful statement, because our city has planned for and has the infrastructure necessary and the funding plans for the infrastructure necessary for that growth. That's part of having a comprehensive plan. That's part of having our transportation plans and our all of our capital facilities plans. So that's something to keep in mind, is that a statement like that would not be accurate. And you also risk doing, I don't know about the legal risk, which there probably is significant legal risk to putting something like that in writing in a formal document, especially as if you turn down developers for any type of project. There's also the political and relationship risk of putting the city out on an island in a way with our state agencies that makes them not trust us. A statement like that in an introduction is likely to grab the attention of the reviewers, and also put additional criticism and eyes on the plan to a greater extent. So this is very political, but it's also very technical and very legal oriented. We have a city in Washington state that is contemplating bankruptcy right now from a developer agreement that the city council chose not to implement. Bankruptcy. This is not a small game. This isn't just putting out statements. This is really serious business. I really want to impress that upon this group, no matter what we think and feel, no matter how valid, that we need to think about our taxpayers and the impacts that some of these actions have on us long-term, and think about the long-term goals, the long-term impacts of doing what we're required to do and working through the system appropriately, and then refocusing and taking the appropriate actions and getting the intensive involvement of elected officials to start moving the dial in the future.
Director Thomas.
So one thing, just to kind of go a little bit further too with what's happening in this legislative session, which kind of gives me a little bit, I'll call it the tea leaves, is that there is a bill now that will require cities to have portions of their comprehensive plan actually approved by the Department of Commerce. And one of them is the housing element. So that kind of tells me that there's not a lot of empathy at the legislature right now. So I think we have that happening as well. And we're not going to be approving our plan until after the legislature has made that decision. And I was talking to Cynthia, I'm like, is this going to become effective July when they usually a lot of the legislation does, or is it going to apply at the next time we update our comprehensive plans? So I think there's just a lot that's going on down there that isn't necessarily favorable for small, non-contiguous cities. And implementation is going to be really challenging.
I'm going to move on to the next discussion item. There'll be opportunity to revisit this topic during the council meeting. The one thing I'll sort of just end on there is we do have the upcoming action days. I know only a couple folks from council are going. I don't know, John, if there's still an opportunity on different days, because I think it's over a couple days. So if you are interested and sort of want to directly interface with your legislature, I encourage the mayor, reinforce the mayor's comments that there's an opportunity to do that. So the next item for discussion is consideration of revenue options for city financing, and that's Director Nichols. It's related to SRO.
Well, it's just related. We're going to keep this on the agenda. This is just kind of a reminder to me to ask, what council needs in terms of information and continuing to move the conversation along. So on Friday, I sent out a chart with kind of the shallow dive I took on how cities and school districts partner in financing school resource officer positions. I believe on Monday, an updated packet was sent out that has more pages than you ever want to read on ILAs between cities and school districts. So from my perspective, I'm going to check that box that I've gotten council the information you requested last time. So just opening it up and asking a question again. Right now I want to compile all the data that you all think you might need, and then we'll move into kind of more of a plan on maybe a consideration matrix, a SWOT analysis. I don't know, some way, some tool for council to work through some of the considerations you need to make. So any questions about the data that I gave over the last week, and then new information?
Yeah, I wasn't here. I was here last one. This subject has come up, but as we're considering the options, do we have anything we're doing that's also say, what are we considering that we can cut as well? Where are we? Do we have, instead of just say, how do we get more? I know that staff, they're going to cancel everybody in the budget to push things off, delay things, and trim some with our budget process. But it's an ongoing process. Instead of just looking for ways of revenue, or can we in parallel understand what can we be looking at to cut as well?
So at the last meeting, council did ask that in preparation for your retreat that I put together, I don't know what we would call it yet, but a plan for should council either not approve different revenue options, or if ballot measures fail, what would a go forward plan look like? And so I will be doing that. I will need to think about how to deliver that, because any document I prepare becomes public record. And this would, as I mentioned at the last meeting, purely be my planning, probably along with the directors and the finance director, but it is very much a city administrative plan. It is council's decision on what to fund in the city. So I'm gonna have to figure out how to deliver that, whether I come in for 20 minutes and give an oral presentation, whatever that looks like. But it will, by the time y'all go to retreat, you'll have something from the city that gets to that question.
And one of the other things, Councilman Henry and I chatted a little bit. I mean, we've been looking for ways to sort of bring some of the WSELI learnings back to the council. And one of the exercises we sort of talked about is a prioritization exercise, because I think part of that, John, is kind of where we want to invest, where we need to cut, where we need to grow, and then that really determines the mechanism for funding that. But the root of it, which I think is what you alluded to, is really within it from a council perspective, identifying our priorities. If there were things that you could do without, or you would want to prioritize, and those are very different probably across council members. So there's some exercises that we learned in terms of how to do that organically, and our hope is to potentially bring some of that into the retreat. So. Councilmember Matheson.
Yeah, so I sent something to everyone on council. It's about the Center for Government Innovation. It's I guess a division within the department, the state auditor, and they run a service. It's called Lean Services. Well, they will bring something into your city, take a look at your processes, and try to find one that they think is, likely to find some level of innovation, efficiencies, something like that, and work through it with you. It's a really amazing service. And I personally feel like if we're going to go to the taxpayer and ask for really, it sounds like 3 different tax increases, that showing that we have tried some of these things, just I think our community would really appreciate that. And I would like to see it personally. I know that when we have a rapid expansion of staff, we went from about 40 staff to 62, I believe, in a very short amount of time. We've added a lot of new systems to the city. It just might be a good time to have someone come in and really kind of run this program on something.
Councilmember. Councilmember, sorry.
We're starting a project in April.
With the lean,
yes.
Yeah, and I would also note that the salary survey, the workload analysis, and the municipal financial plan are all key guiders of that. And they all clearly outlined that we are understaffed still, even with the staffing levels that we have, and that we have significant financial challenges that we need to address. And as we discussed at the last meeting for Councilmember Isaacson's benefit, since he wasn't able to be here, we also discussed that the only thing we have to cut is general fund. That's police, parks, and city hall. Those are the only general fund dollars. All these taxes go to general fund for levies, etc. Those are the only 3 areas to cut. We know that we can't afford to cut police. We know that, in fact, we're still significantly underfunded there. We know that we can't afford to have any fewer people in finance than we have now. We were just reminding folks that we were told by our consultants that we are still down and at risk financially, especially if we reduce our finance department anymore. And that financial risk is not just tax, that's legal risk to the city as well. So I just want to, continue to remind folks that when we're talking about ballot measures, it is for police and parks and the core functions of our city hall and our clerk's office to keep our city running. And we already know that we desperately need an assistant city manager or city administrator or HR person, and we weren't able to afford that this year. And so our city administrator has been burning the candle at both ends for 2.5 years now without that assistance. And I think it's done a pretty amazing job. But all these other things that everyone wants to do cannot get done without staff. And there's not much left to cut. Truthfully, we could cut summer stage, we could cut our grant funding. Everybody's wanted to continue to put those forward. But grant funding and our summer events are, for the most part, the only discretionary funding that the city has. And I don't believe that the community would support in cutting that, or our police or our parks. So I just want to remind folks that that is part of the discussion we've been having. It kind of brings us back to focus of, it's not just dollars and cents. We've done significant financial work. But the last 8 years, we've been catching up for decades of not doing what needed to be done in the city and having professional management to keep us out of financial trouble and legal trouble.
Councilmember McKelvey.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, that's all really important to the narrative story, because those are the questions people are going to ask is, are you already running lean enough? And we can answer that, and we'll be able to show them the answers to that. So I think that's important. And at the end of the day, I think our job is to decide what to bring forward, what to put out there. But the voters are going to decide, and then we'll have to do whatever we'll do with what they tell us. So I think for me, at least, it takes a bit of pressure off. I know we just need to figure out what we're going to put forward to the voters, but at the end of the day, it's really their decision.
That's fault. Again, I've always got all my questions. I don't need people on beating ass, right? That's just my mentality. Like I want to not always just go down one path. I guarantee you, we were talking about here, cut. I'd be saying, how about get to? I don't want us to all just go down one path. And ultimately, I'm glad the voters will make a decision for us. But I'm very grateful that we're going to do this lean drill the service, because then we go to the voters with pure transparency that, look, we think we've done our job for you. And unfortunately, the only way we can make this work is if you vote on these things to take more of your money from you that you already feel you don't have enough to live off of. And they're going to want to know that our government has done the same thing, as opposed to say, grow, because we aren't getting things done and we got to keep getting things done. Well, guess what? Our citizens are saying, there's a lot of things I need to do that I can't do either because I don't have the money. And now you're asking me to give you more money. So what's more important, my house or this? That's
Following the law.
Yeah, administrative.
Well, I understand what you're saying. I guarantee you a lot of citizens feel like they can't do what they need to from a law perspective too. They can't take care of their kids right. And they can be afraid someone can take their kids wrong. It's that dire and that's why I challenge some of this. It's not a personal thing.
I do want to make it clear that the way the state auditor lien program works is they don't come in and look through your entire government. That is not how that program is designed. They ask you to come up with 2 or 3 ideas for them to run lean principles on and teach your team how to be lean leaders. So managing expectations, the state auditor is not coming in and running lean across every city function. That is not what that program is. I have come up with 2 or 3 ideas that they're going to run lean on, and then we will all get trained on lean leadership.
And I just want to sort of acknowledge, I think we all play devil's advocate, but also to stress test, and specifically, I think to respond to what you said, John, in terms of to be able to respond to the constituents. But the other part, I think, is also, even though we not 100% agree, getting on the same page so that when it does come time to tell the city story or to justify or explain why, in a positive or negative way, we all sort of are singing from the same, what is it? Yes, at least have some alignment in terms of messaging. And I think that's where, cities win or fail sometimes because they're speaking with different voices. I think the other is also acknowledging that across the constituents in the city, it's also not going to always go one way or the other. So this has been a really good dialogue. I don't know, Cynthia, that you got what you needed in terms of next things, but
no, it's just a continuing dialogue. I want to make sure that before, I guess, particularly in terms of timing, before you all go into retreat, that you have enough information. Now, are we going to be able to get you perfect information on every question you have or not? But enough information and background on different items that you can collectively, at least, prioritize and have those conversations. So I'll keep putting this on there. It could be as easy as a 1-minute conversation. It could be more robust, kind of just leaving it on there to take the temperature of council.
And I just wanted to check in with Councilmember Supple as well. You hadn't asked any questions, but just make sure you had an opportunity.
Yeah, no, I'm just listening at this point.
Councilmember Naplin and then Councilmember Schaefer, and then I think we'll have a little time for.
Yeah, it's super quick. When we go into the retreat, I think one other helpful piece of information is the approximate cost to the taxpayer for each of the options of sales tax. And so to estimate how much a sales tax increase would be for household, let's say, if we could get an estimate of the amount of sales generated per household, because for me, even though there's the argument, well, if you go into Bellevue, theirs is already 10%, what's the difference? We're just raising ours to what's similar, but I purposely choose to have things shipped here. I buy things in town to have the lower sales tax. And so any increase in our sales tax will hit my bottom dollar for sure. So anyway, if we can get some kind of estimate of, like I said, about how much per household sales tax, and then we could figure out the actual cost for government.
Councilmember Schaefer.
Yeah, quick questions. I think I know the answer. I just want to make sure I understand and the rest of the council understands. The SRO specifically, how much does that cost us per year? And does the city pay 100%?
So I'd have to look, not hooked up to VPN right now, but I can send it to you. The salary table for the officer, because it escalates every year based on the collective bargaining agreement of the Duval Police Association. Just depends on what the COLA is under that collective bargaining agreement. And the second part of your question is a little easier. We pay 100% through the property tax levy. So that comes to the city and the city pays 100% of the salary. We have no cost share with the school.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
I just have one short comment on all of full community events that we've had this year. The community is very clear that they prioritize police, parks, and the public events the city puts on. So I think the ask is, you know, right where they want to have us focus, and we can't focus on those things because we don't have money to run. So unfortunately, you got to pay to play.
And then I have just one follow-up question on SRO, since you sort of circled back to that. Yeah. Was just in terms of, and I should have asked the chief this when he was here and I couldn't recall, was the SRO role, is that officer 100% of their time also in the district, or is that a split focus? Because that would be the other way to play with this, I think, in terms of what Councilmember Naplin brought in, if they're 60% school and 40% to look, you know, or whatnot, to look at some sharing based on focus. But that was really the only way that I thought ultimately there could maybe be some split, but I was just curious where that would be.
Yeah, so that is, you know, when you look at cost shares across cities and the different ILAs, and there's lots of examples I put in the packet. So our SRO is a patrol officer and is in our salary table as a patrol officer. So when they are not at the school, so say summer months, they effectively become a patrol officer under our unit control. So the school district is relieved the officer is relieved of duties to the school district.
Thank you.
There is some expectation that the SRO, so it's not a 9-to-5 job, obviously. So the SRO does work different hours sometimes because they're expected to be at games and sometimes some evening and weekend events. So the schedule's a little different during school district hours than a normal patrol officer, but during the summer they convert to a patrol officer.
Thank you.
Super quick, I promise. I just want to check in on the timeline. I know there was some info there before, and assuming that cost-wise, we've all, I felt like collectively agreed that something would go on the general election ballot to save costs. Are we good knowing that our retreat, and that sounds like something we might talk about there, is toward the end of March? Are we okay for when we need to make a hard decision on what we're doing? And then also, I guess a quick follow-up to that is, do we already have the process going to secure a consultant to help us, knowing that they might be busy and booked out?
So I will, so a retreat in March would not be able to get, if you wanted to be on the spring ballot, it would be a no. But given that you have more flexibility in the August, the primary ballot and the general ballot, as long as you get a decision made May-ish, you're fine. If you want to make the August ballot, perfectly fine for the November ballot. I have not, I mean, I know who the consultants are if we were to try to get a consultant. I have not done that work because council has not actually said you want to do these options. So I would say by April, please let me know, because I'd have to do like RFP. Yeah. And sooner the better if we want to secure somebody. Because there's a lot of folks going on the ballot from cities and different initiatives. I will say it's public, so I feel comfortable sharing. I was told this before. KCLS just put out an RFP for a consultant in preparation for 2026 ballot measure. So they're not anticipating for 2020.
And I think we did do a straw poll in the room, you know, that the focus will be on the fall as well. All right, so at 6:49, probably we could get some council reports, but give a sort of a break, and then we'll pick those up with 7. So And the Cal, call the Cal to close at 6:50 p.m.
Right, because we're so focused on.
That's just a second.
And that, I think that was.
This would go, I mean, you know, signage and, you know, advertising, it comes from the market.
Yeah.
So really.
Great. I'd like to call the Tuesday, February 4th, 2025 Duval City Council meeting to order. I'd ask you to all please rise and join me in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Will you please take the roll?
Mayor Oberlander here. Mayor Pro Tem Mercer
Here.
Mr. Isaacson
Here.
Mr. Schaefer
Here.
Ms. McHenry
Here.
Mr. Supple
Here.
Ms. Napland
Here.
Ms. Kufelt
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum. Everyone is present this evening. Under additions and corrections to the agenda, under the mayor's report, I'd like to add a statement from Mayor Oberlander and the Duval City Council. And I'm going to be asking council to vote to sign on to the statement in regards to harm and fear in our community by multiple groups within our community and around the nation right now. So a heads up on that. And then are there any other additions or corrections to the agenda?
Could you expand this?
I'll read it into the record and we can have this discussion on it. It's so we've had in particular the federal government has removed all DEI from everything, which impacts our veterans, it impacts our people in our communities with disabilities, it impacts the disadvantaged, our LGBTQIA community and many, many others. And there's a lot of people feeling harm and actually experiencing harm as a result of those orders and that protection being destroyed from the federal government at all levels in our country right now. So it's addressing that and expressing our support for them, but I will read it into the record for sure. Councilmember Knapp.
Yeah, I might have missed it and you said it, but did we do the excusing for Councilmember Isaacson?
I haven't had a formal request from a council member on that yet, so but we
should I do that?
Go ahead.
Okay, I would like to make a motion to excuse Councilmember Isaacson from the meeting he missed. I think it was the January 21st, 2025 meeting due to an illness.
Okay. All right. Are there any objections? That will be added under additions and corrections to the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve this evening's council agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. We'll go ahead and move on to proclamations. So we do have a proclamation for Black History Month, and I'll go ahead and read that into the record. Whereas Black History Month is a time to celebrate the rich heritage, extraordinary achievements, and immeasurable contribution of Black Americans throughout history, and whereas Black Americans have played a pivotal role in shaping the social, cultural, economic, and political fabric of our nation, from the courageous leaders of the abolitionist movement and the civil rights era to the trailblazers in science, arts, education, and innovation. And whereas this month serves as a reminder of the enduring strength, resilience, and spirit of Black communities who have faced systemic oppression, injustice, and inequality with unyielding courage, determination. And whereas we recognize the importance of preserving and sharing the stories of Black individuals whose voices have been silenced or overlooked, ensuring that future generations learn from the triumphs and struggles of the past. And whereas Black History Month is an opportunity for all people to deepen their understanding of our nation's shared history, confront the ongoing realities of racial inequity, and commit to building a future rooted in justice, equity, and inclusion. Now, therefore, I, Amy Oberlander, Mayor of the City of Duval, do hereby proclaim February 2025 as Black History Month in the City of Duval. I encourage all residents to honor and celebrate the legacy of Black Americans, seek out opportunities for education and dialogue, and join in fostering a community that uplifts and values diversity, equity, and belonging. All right, now we'll move on to comments from the audience. We do not have any members of the audience, so I will not read the rules into the record, and we will move on to approval of this evening's consent agenda.
Mayor, if I may, for clarification, did you mean to add council members Isaacson's excused absence to the consent agenda?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
All those in favor of the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, please say no. Motion passes. All right, moving on to scheduled items for mayor's report. First off, I'd like to share that the Association of Washington Cities State Legislative Steering Committee met today. One big bill up for discussion and direction from the AWC staff is the bill that is proposing a road usage charge that would eliminate the gas tax and charge drivers for the miles driven. The group, which is diverse from small towns, big towns, conservative and liberal, all agreed that we wanted the Association of Washington Cities to move forward with advocacy for the bill, as well as working to get specific carve-outs for city authority to use that for transportation funding in our communities. We did get some interesting data, which I'm happy to share with the council, but there has been public opinion polling statewide from all over the state. The support for road usage charge in place of gas tax is now there. There are concerns by some folks that in areas where there is heavy transit, like there is in the Puget Sound area, that they are going to benefit more from the road usage charge than those in Eastern Washington, in particular the more rural communities, because of miles traveled. There's actually data showing now that that's actually not the case. It actually is the way that the bill is structured. It's actually intended to be neutral for those rural drivers, and it's actually those drivers in the urban areas that would actually be more overall. So it's a really interesting presentation. So if council would like me to share that with you, I'm happy to share it out after this meeting. And then, of course, we did talk about Association of Washington Cities Conference, Legislative Action Conference coming up in a couple of weeks. I believe there's still spots available for that. I believe that is it for the main report. So I'll go ahead and move on to the statement. And as I shared a moment ago, this has come forth. It's actually at the request of Councilmember Klufelt, but it had been on my mind as well, that we've seen in the past 2 weeks, we've not just seen significant harm and fear brought upon our immigrants, including our immigrants who are American citizens in this country, but fear amongst many communities, especially our LGBTQI community, people of color, indigenous communities in particular, as well as our veterans and those that need social services and those with disabilities. So I asked the city administrator to draft this statement, and I'm requesting that council also sign on to it to send a message to our community that we have everyone in our communities back, regardless of what's going on at the federal level, and that we continue to support them as we always have in any way that we can, so that they feel safe in our community. And I think especially now, it's incredibly important that we support people in our community, whether we agree with them or not, whether we support their views or not. This is just so important. So I'll go ahead and read that into the record. The city of Duval remains committed to a city that is welcoming, safe, and inclusive for all to work, play, and live here. In times of uncertainty, fear, hurtful rhetoric, and division, we reaffirm our pledge to uphold the values of dignity, respect, and equality that form the very foundation of our city and reside in the core of our community. We stand united with and offer support to those who are currently feeling targeted and or subjected to forms of discrimination, whether they be people of color, transgender members of the LGBTQIA+ community, immigrants, refugees, members of religious communities, veterans, indigenous communities, or those who are affected by effects of climate change. We recognize that our strength lies in our diversity and that everyone, regardless of race, religion, gender, sexual orientation, national origin, or any other identity, deserves to feel safe, valued, and empowered. As public servants, we will work to ensure that all residents have equal opportunities to thrive and protect their rights against all forms of hate and intolerance. Now more than ever, we urgently call upon community leaders, regional and state leadership, law enforcement, educators, and every resident to stand with us in rejecting hate and promoting inclusivity. This is not a passive request, but a call to immediate action. We encourage all residents to speak out against injustice, support one another, and work collectively towards creating an environment where every voice is heard and every life is respected. Our administration is committed to continuing our collaboration with local organizations and community groups that champion justice and inclusiveness. This commitment is unwavering. We will continue to provide support to those affected by discrimination and hate, and we are dedicated to enacting policies that safeguard the rights of our diverse population and foster an environment of understanding, compassion, and unity. In solidarity, Amy Okerlander, Mayor, and I will pass it around to all council that would like to sign it.
Mayor, my main question on the road use policy. Does vehicle weight figure into that?
I would have to double check the actual legislation. It has in the past, but I'm not sure that it does in this one.
Okay, I would think that makes
sense,
right?
Yeah, so for sure.
Okay.
And similar question, a little different flavor. I know some of the concern of the pushback has been around sort of the courier services, Amazon, others. I'm assuming the overwhelming support is more from the citizens of Washington versus sort of the corporate side.
Yes, and some businesses actually, depending on what type of business they are, would actually see less money going into it, especially if they're using electric vehicles. The Amazons and what have you of the world, they're also looking at potentially a per delivery charge, a very, very small one that people would not feel based on those, based on each delivery that could generate a lot of money, and that would. I'm not sure where that's going to go this year, but it's part of that discussion to really try and get the legislature to move to having a stable funding source and an equitable funding source for funding our road maintenance and construction.
Ready for me?
Ready for you. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. So good evening, Cynthia McNabb, City Administrator, to those listening in or in the audience. Report for this council meeting. Next slide. So Director Ledaszewski is out, so Director Thomas happily that you would do the Public Works update. So I will turn it over to Director Thomas to do both the Public Works and the Community Development update.
Good evening, Mayor, council members of our community. Public Works updates are always super fun. I always love to do them when I'm given the opportunity. Our new HVAC system installation began at City Hall over the weekend. So that's great news. There were a couple little bumps, and so I think they're getting those ironed out. A project that's been kind of talked about for, I don't know, maybe at least 12 to 18 months is the PSC Up and Go public pole chargers. So that is getting much closer. So you'll see on the right-hand side what it could look like. Finalized locations with PSC. It's going to be about 6 to 8 months to deployment. And we're looking at Stella Street and the depot. So we're excited to see that project move forward. And I don't think there's a lot out there. I'm kind of speaking out a little bit about a turn right now, but I haven't seen a whole lot in the region yet. So I think we're going to be one of those like kind of first 20% of cities to get it.
I think there are a couple more pictures. There we go.
Yes. And so you'll see that that's what it looks like. Final design and location obviously are forthcoming. But I think Public Works has done a really good job working with PSC. It's taken a lot of time to get this far. Next slide.
Well, Lauren, do you charge for those have credit card things?
You know, I
don't see anything that looks like that.
I'm assuming it's not free, but get back to me. Is it free? Do we know? I doubt it's free.
Usually they're apps.
Yeah.
I think they're gonna run on their apps, but
yeah,
we'll get back.
I've not seen one, so we'll get back to you on that. Thank you for that question. Let's see. Working with PSC, they've requested information to see about increasing amount of light from existing street lights, so that's awesome. The engineering staff is inventorying our lights and a report to PSE. One of the great things about having staff and GIS and the robust systems is that we're putting a lot more into our GIS and what we call flagged, which are individual layers within there. PSE will see about potentially increasing the wattage to poles to make them a little bit lighter, right? So that we get better light on Main Street. This will take, it says months to work out. My guess is maybe we'll be back here in 6 months on that item.
Just in time for a fallback.
Yes, that's in time for fallback, exactly. Next slide. This was a great meeting. So thank you to the council members that came. We had our transportation open house last week, and we had really good turnout, really good discussions, and lots of great questions. So stay tuned. Okay, we'll roll into community development, which of course I love as well, but isn't always as fun. We're preparing for 2 design review meetings, one for Towns 143rd and one for a commercial daycare. February 6th is our King County Housing Committee meeting, where we get 2 whole minutes to have a discussion with the committee. Not that I'm not really complaining, because we did have 2 really good meetings with staff, so we're pretty ironed in there. But I was kind of giggling. We get to be like the public at this meeting. We have 3 pre-application meetings. We had one of them last week, and we have 2 coming up next week. One's for an athletic use, and 2 are for mixed use projects. And one of them, by the way, is for Toll Brothers, so that they can meet their 90-day and 6-month requirement to bring in a development application on phase 2 of the Toll Brothers project. We are going to do our update of our current development map in March. And so stay tuned to see that next month. Coming up next, as far as policy work is, sign code, permit processing, and ADUs. Those will all start touching Planning Commission and Council beginning pretty quickly, actually the end of this month and into next month. Next slide. Kind of our building dashboard for January, pretty slow January, but that's pretty typical because it's winter and it has been very cold. You can do a lot less work when the ground is really frozen. You can do internal work or vertical work. But I was out on site today, and there were not very many contractors on site. We issued 2 permits, single family permits in the month of January. We have 8 waiting to be picked up. And then we have about 35 under review and 33 issued. And then total inspections is 200, so still quite a bit. I am going to start to put a few more photos into our city administrator report. So on the left, and I just put a note, this particular home, and notice I didn't put the address up, failed our landscape inspection. It didn't meet our slope, didn't meet our plant size, and it failed drainage. And so that's not uncommon. It happens almost on every unit. It just depends on what landscaper they have. So just as a point of reference, the little tiny plants up against the concrete, they're supposed to be 5 gallon size, and those were 1 gallon size. The slope is supposed to be about 3 to 1, and it was 2 to 1. And then you can see a little bit how the drainage is kind of coming off onto the sidewalk. Those are the things that your planning department does every day. And what I mean every day, on 400 houses, 2 or 3 times, if not more, for each of those houses. So think about that in a perspective of how many times we're out in the field. Next slide. I had a slide also on the transportation open house, but of course mine have photos in them. And so you can see a council member in one of them, and Larissa, she kind of got cut off a little bit, but she liked that. Is when she was having a conversation. And then we had 2 people that were just watching the continuous slideshow for the transportation plan. I know that staff felt really good after that meeting because we felt like people are showing up. Would we have liked another 25? Of course, but we thought it went really well. Next slide. Holy smokes, comprehensive plan page. Go and look at it and look at the YouTube station. There's a QR code. We have new episodes up, and now we also have movies/videos as well. And I definitely want to thank the clerk's office, because they're the ones that take all of our videos and get them up and on to YouTube. So we very much appreciate that. Over on the right-hand side is actually just a screenshot from our YouTube station for the city. So you can see, like, we are really, like, as a city, starting to get out there. We're going to start posting a little bit more through social media as community development as well, so that we can start to put some of this stuff better out in front. And that being said, you know, we really want Planning Commission and Council also to listen to these podcasts and these, I'll just call them like little vignette movies. And so they can be from 3 minutes to 15 minutes, because these are essentially our presentations and our memos and all the things that we would normally do, but differently, where you can listen to it and get a better picture. If you don't want to read a report, you can pretty much listen to a conversation. So it's more conversational, because not everybody wants to read something. I think that was my
Dr. Thomas, I just wanted to note, and for clerk staff as well, this is fantastic. And I will say that these are all popping up in the GoGov app. And I will say the last 2 weeks has been fantastic to be able to see things as they come up. It comes up in both an alert through the app and a notice and email. And it is, I think, a game changer for how we communicate with our residents. And I just want to say thank you to everybody that did that research and brought that program forward and has put it in place, especially with all the additional communications work you all are doing for all these important things. So thank you very much. I know our community appreciates it, even if we're not hearing it yet.
We'll share that with staff. Thank you.
All right.
I forgot to take that one out. I apologize. I'm like staring at it.
Read it again. Okay, so City Hall update. The Economic Development and Tourism Grant application opens this week. We posted it on social media yesterday, I believe. It will link to our website, and on the website it explains that while we didn't budget a specific amount for those economic development and tourism grants, we are opening the application for unique or interesting ideas that council could potentially amend the budget for. It also does say that folks should put in an application for the in-kind. So that's, you know, banner fee waivers, any event or tourism idea that would require significant staff time. So that's up and going. I'll be curious if people take advantage of the opportunity to put in an application, even if they don't know that there's secured funding. So this is the second time we've rescheduled our staff training day. The first was a bomb cyclone, rescheduled for Thursday, and now it looks like we might get snow, so I might have to reschedule that again. But for this training, it's kind of staff icebreakers, getting to know each other, but also HR policy review. We're doing training on First Amendment auditors. We're doing driver safety training, as well as some training on disabilities in the workplace. So we have a really good agenda planned, a really good program, if we can actually pick a day that doesn't do it. So more to follow on that. I'm going to keep rolling on the kudos to the clerk's office. So they continue to create efficiencies and better communications tools throughout the city. So this week, online facility rentals went live on our website. So anybody who has ever tried to rent this building or the Rose Room and tried to fill out all the paperwork by hand on these old forms, thank you to John and Kelsey. That now is a thing of the past. 7 years in the making. Thank you. So it's all online. It looks great. They also updated the webpage for facility rentals, so it's far more clear. In the same vein, community events and community development continue to optimize our OpenGov platform. So now special event permits are online, and the website has been updated with more detailed information for special events. A big thank you to community events for Rita and Director Thomas's team. So they held open houses with our nonprofit community to walk them through the new permitting platform and make sure that any questions get answered. And we had a couple nonprofits who were guinea pigs, and I really want to thank them too for jumping in with us and leaning in on getting this stuff online, because it's a little cumbersome to learn something new. And then finally, last week I attended the first meeting of the Snoqualmie Valley Tourism Project that's being sponsored by a grant from Washington State Tourism Board. So we were not among the steering committee. That's going to change. Duval, I'm going to now be on the steering committee for that project, but it's a really big project that hopes to brand the Snoqualmie Valley as a tourism district and create not just a steering committee for the project, but there will be a leadership team following the project that really gets to identifying the tourism needs of the Snoqualmie Valley and promoting our businesses, our events and our activities and all the things that make Snoqualmie Valley really special. If you're interested in what these projects look like, the Columbia River Basin or Columbia River Valley did this project. We're following in this vein is that project around the Waterfall District and all the wineries along the Columbia River. So our program that we're participating in is modeled after that one. There's a video online that you can see from Washington State Tourism of that project along the Columbia River. And it ran the gamut of making sure that tourism is responsible and not flooding individual cities, being respectful of the environmental damage to some of our extra loved natural resources. So for here, Snoqualmie Falls, Mount Si, making sure that tourism activities are responsible and that they are benefiting the local businesses as opposed to, conglomerate businesses, and then dealing with transportation issues. So it's a really exciting project. I will be out of the office again February 25th and 26th all day, both days for this project. And there's another all day in March. Rita will be joining me as a city representative as well on this project. And then my hope is between now and February 25th to get more of our nonprofits and businesses out and participating, and residents too. So at my table last week, I had a resident from Falls City. I had a business owner who owns a business in Snoqualmie and North Bend. I had one of the managers from the U.S. Forest Service, a member of the tribe. So it's a big, broad swath of people that are involved in this project, and they really want more participation. Morgan Henley did come in the afternoon. He was the only other Duvalian or semi-Duvalian, yes, who was there with me last week. But it's a really good project. I'm very excited about it. And then finally, just promoting our new app. It's working. We're pumping information out of it. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead, Councilman.
Not necessarily a question, again, I want to sort of echo the engagement the community's doing. I've listened to a couple of the podcasts, and it's sort of a nice way to sort of shift how we're digesting our information. I'm sure the community appreciates it as well. This was more of just a question. I know whether it's the slide presentations we do, it's sort of piggybacking a little bit on the mayor's statement about being inclusive. I was just curious from a perspective of the clerk's office, if we run like the presentations through accessibility checker, just checking for color blindness or contrast, that might be an ask, if you haven't explored it, something to explore. But I'd love to make sure that these resources are available to everyone, whether it's following up and watching the meeting after the fact, or some of the presentations we're making available. But appreciate the work everyone's doing.
We'll definitely look into that. Thank you for bringing it up.
Councilmember Naplan?
Yeah, on the slide from City Administrator McNabb, for the Economic Development and Tourism grant, one thing that we talked about before was having as part of their application sort of a financial sustainability type explanation of what is your funding model in future years. Like if you get seed money to try an event, is there a model that would make this sustainable something like that. So I don't know if that ended up being part of the application or how that will work, because I think one thing that you worry about is if we only have so much money, and are we committing to something that only happens if we pay it every single year or it's gone? And kind of just, we want to provide seed money, hopefully.
So that is part of the application in terms of the grading process. And then one of the specific asks that was an ad last year was to develop a marketing plan. Sorry, a marketing plan. So that now is part of the required attachment is, are you going to market this? How are you going to market it? Some of our applicants were a little more sophisticated in developing a marketing plan than others. But yes, part of the program is tell us about how you're going to fund this, or tell us about how you're going to make this.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Councilmember Schaefer.
I just want to say how excited and appreciative I am of you participating in the Snoqualmie Valley Tourism project. You know, sometimes we lose track, but you know, Duval isn't, you know, a standalone thing. We're a package deal, right? And our identity is ingrained with the valley, rurally and with the other cities in the valley. So this type of approach, a more integrated, consolidated approach, I think will have significant success for the whole valley, including Duval. So thank you for giving all of your attention to that.
Thank you. All right, anything else? Okay, well, we've only got 2 presentations tonight, so we'll go ahead and move on to our first one, the 2024 council report. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Council reports is next. Does anybody in council have anything you'd like to present? Councilmember Schaefer.
Yeah, just real quick, and Jennifer brought this to my attention. The chamber is considering, and I don't think they finalized the idea yet, but considering of more of a packaged approach for the council membership. So I've been the official council representative to the Chamber of Commerce. That's not been totally successful. I'm not sure I've attended a meeting in the last year, in fact. So, and it's not because I don't want to. There's things that come up, including council meetings. A lot of times they meet on Tuesdays. But the package, the different approach would be to essentially have one individual from the council attend the chamber. How we do that would probably be up to us. But instead of just me alone, that would open it up to other members of the council.
Yeah, so Director Thompson and I were actually just talking about this, I think yesterday. In the past, it's kind of been the same with staff. You know, one staff could go to the meetings with the one membership. And I believe on their website now, they now have you can
group,
yeah,
and nonprofit.
Yeah.
And I'm signed up to go on Thursday, so I paid my $15 for whatever I paid for. I guess it's for a meal, and we're gonna take turns as directors and administrators and try to be at all of them, and even at the Rotary.
Yeah, I'm going in March, and then on Friday, myself, Councilmember McHenry, Rita, and the president and vice president of chamber are meeting to have coffee to talk about our partnership and what more we can do together.
Okay, so let me understand that the staff membership is different than the council membership. So it's an addition, I should say. Yeah, okay. So yeah, we can do something like that, you know, on a rotating basis or however we decide. That'd be terrific. I do believe now with some recent changes in the chamber, new president and directors and so on, I think they're more open to this type of idea, which I'm really encouraged by.
Yeah.
Councilmember Nathan.
Yeah, I did speak to the chamber president this morning, and he did confirm that change has been made, and it was okay if I let people know that that our council membership will allow more than just the one named council member. So one of the ideas I had, because I think this is how the chamber operates, is they have a sign up sheet. Just so I don't know if we could circulate something like that. I don't know if that would happen through the mayor pro tem, just to try to have representation at each meeting. you know, as we kind of look at the calendar of each month, there's a chamber meeting if someone was willing to volunteer. And obviously, maybe there might be months where no one can go, but we would attempt to create a little bit of a schedule to try to have some representation. Because I get the impression that they are very excited to, you know, really engage with the city and want to make sure that council feels welcome. So anyway, I don't know how the logistics of how we create sign-up sheets, but
Mayor Pro Tem Mercer.
And this isn't really a report as much as sort of a report of a report. I know Councilmember Seppel sort of covered the first public issues committee for Sound Cities. They're kicking off their orientation and sort of new members intro next Wednesday. So I guess that will formally introduce into progress, and then, you know, that will provide that report out. But obviously some of the things that we're discussing in here in terms of issues top of mind at another forum to sort of align with our sister cities and come to some consensus in terms of how we want to communicate the challenges. Looking forward to bringing back future reports.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Councilmember McHenry.
I just want to let you all know I was appointed to the 2025 Small Cities Council with the National League of Cities. So I'm excited to participate in that way at the upcoming conferences and see, you know, what that's all about. I've been to a couple just, you know, casually, but to be a part of it's a little different. And then I know City Administrator McNabb and Councilmember Naplin, I believe, were also at the SVGA, the Snoqualmie Valley Governance Association meeting last month. And I think the main event there was the presentation by the Snoqualmie tribe and talking about how to involve them, at what stage in the process, the kinds of things we should be thinking about and how to bring them in, you know, when we're breaking ground on something and all the how-tos, and bring them in early enough that it's impactful. And also just there was some firsthand accounts by one of the Snoqualmie tribe members about how all the stuff nationally right now is affecting them and how they've had to help each other and protect each other. And it's just, I don't know, that was really impactful to hear how that's been hurting them. But other than that, I'll be at AWC this month. Was it the 19th and the 20th? Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. I think there's going to be a Wasselli meetup as well, so that'll be great. But that's all I have.
Thank you, Councilmember. Anyone else? Councilmember Isaacson.
So not really a report, but I wanted to try to back this at some point. When's the appropriate time to have discussions on this?
If council wants to have a discussion now, you're welcome to. But that's up to the council.
Yes. I want to hear what's in your mind.
Okay. So first, a couple questions. I'm a bit concerned about the approach with this. I brought a piece of paper by the mayor that's asking me to sign something I've never read before. I've never edited it, and I don't know what the intentions are with this. From the good nature of it, I'm on board with it. But I'm afraid of the intent with it and how it will be interpreted by some. So I don't think it's appropriate to give me a piece of paper with my name, asking me to sign it, whether I agree or disagree with this statement, and then where it's going to go. If you post this somewhere, my signature's not on here, and maybe another council member's signature's not on here, post it in public. People are going to read this and they're going to interpret it as in maybe I am anti some of this. So I have huge concerns about the approach that's been done with this. From a legal perspective, can you do this to me? And then where do you go with this after we leave here? Whether my signature's on here or not, I know where I stand. But I am worried severely about how people will interpret if I do not sign this. Because there are words in here that can be divisive just because of how they're interpreted, even though you may mean well with them. It can become divisive. It can cause the badness that you're alluding to just because someone will not sign this piece of paper. So what is the intent of this?
The intent is to show our community the support for everyone in our community. So I didn't print this out. The city administrator printed it. I would assume, I'm not going to speak for you, but I would assume that the city administrator assumed that folks would sign it. If you don't want to sign your name to it, we can have it reprinted, maybe even tonight, and have it, those who choose to sign its name on it. It will be published for the community to see. The intent is to show that we do not discriminate against people in our community, that we've got their backs. That is pure and simple, and people are being significantly harmed, not just by policy that's being implemented unilaterally without congressional approval, but also in discrimination in their communities and our community, and fear of leaving their homes without passports. A dear friend of mine actually posted about that today, that she no longer leaves, well, hasn't for a while, but even more so now, will not leave her home without a passport and the papers proving that she is a bona fide US citizen, because she is fearful of what is going on right now and what will happen, and because of what has happened to her as a non-white person in our own community. So this is very real. This is about, it's not just Councilmember Kufelt that's reached out, others have reached out as well. Other cities across the state are doing statements like this, because to be quite frank, we are seeing the absolute dismantling of many of the protections and traditions that have been created in our country, including the elimination of the celebration of Martin Luther King Day in our military. And that is very harmful to many people, regardless of their color, nationality, orientation, disability, veteran status, etc. So this is all from that place of acknowledging that we are in a position as elected officials to show our support for our community, and also not stick our heads in the sand about a lot of very serious damaging things that are happening right now that are going to take a generation to unfold. And the generational harm that what's going on right now is going to cause, not just for the people of today, but for their children, in risk of being deported and separated from their families, of people receiving physical harm because of their sexual orientation, the increased suicide risk for many in all of these communities as a result of this happening, including the fact that many people cannot even access their Medicaid benefits or their Social Security system at this point. They're being cut off from the federal government right now. And that is a really big concern, because Congress has not taken that action. So just addressing the issue here of how people are feeling, I think is really important to our community, and I've heard it as well. So if council would prefer that we reprint and have people come in and individually sign, we can do that. But the intent is definitely, and this was an offer to council, if council chooses that they don't want to do this, that's fine. This is part of being inclusive and not having a proclamation that's just the mayor doing it. It's about making sure that everyone who's an elected official in a position of power has the opportunity to share that that they agree and support every person in our community.
I was just going to actually maybe even ask the city administrator to provide some context. I'm assuming most of the council has seen some of the social media. I mean, I think that's the other response, taking it from a sort of a high elevation down to just the local level, sort of the response, both the request that the police, understand the police response in terms of ICE cooperation, but then the response, the 400, it's probably grown since the last time I looked at it, 400 or 500, 600 posts. And so I think from my perspective, John, I'm hearing what you're saying, but I also wanted to take this down to just, how this dovetails into just what we're seeing on the local police department Facebook page and the city Facebook page around just the discrete issue of immigration, but obviously, having a trans child, this is, resonates with me. I think it's really just, from my perspective, this is me acknowledging that I hear you. It's not necessarily saying, we hear your concerns, and as your city representatives, we're here to sort of represent you. But again, everyone's going to have their same comfort level with that. So I want to, also acknowledge your feedback, but I did want to tie it back to some of the social media. So
again, there's a 100% aligned with supporting everyone in our community. I mean, I can give you countless examples of my own family and my own experiences where I'm not opposed to any of these groups listed here. But the timing of a statement like this, and some of the words here, comes across to me as we are as a city saying that we are calling our citizens to action. Right?
If support of those marginalized in our community, absolutely.
But again, in respect of what the intent of this is and the sensitivity of everything that's going on, I am highly concerned about what that can be interpreted as. What are we asking people to do? What are the actions we're asking? Are we asking them to walk in the streets and protest? Are we asking them to just take actions as human beings and respect each other and love each other, which is what I would ask. But the words in here can be just as insightful as what we're saying is causing these problems. And so, again, I'm being put on the spot with my name on a piece of paper without even me having read this and provided maybe, hey, maybe we should tweak this word. Maybe we should take this out. Maybe we should add this. Because there are people that are not listening here that should be listening. And so I'd ask that we either go through a more thorough review and editing process so that the entire city council has input on this, or you do take my name off of it.
We'd be
And
happy
it's not
to
because I'm opposed to this statement. I asked city council to make a motion to say, let's route this through city council to review it before giving me the only opportunity to say, take my name off of it. And now everyone walks around this town and says, I'm a racist, I'm a bigot, I'm anti-gay, I'm against refugees. You know, that's what this says. My name's not on it. And I hate that political pressure that this city is not supposed to be about. We're not supposed, it's supposed to be both sides of the table. This is going to come across if my name is not on the sign, because I'm taking one position only. And it's not how we should govern.
I will say it's not uncommon for these things to come forward last minute for any local jurisdiction, especially as things are happening rapidly. But
I don't care if somebody else says, I'm saying this is not.
I understand that is your perspective. I'm going to let the city administrator talk to this at this point. I've given some options. If council would like to withdraw their signatures and reprint this, that is council's option. Nobody took a vote at this point. This was all free will. So, you know, we take votes on everything. The council takes votes on everything every day. That is a statement in and of itself. This is actually much less firm than that.
Yeah, but you put us in a position where you have to vote publicly to do it or not do it.
There's no vote here.
But you're making us have to vote to whether or not you want to sign it or not.
So we cannot do a statement like this just in City Hall. It has to be done in public because of the Open Public Meetings Act. So I'll let the city administrator respond.
Yeah, so how this came about was a variety of ways. So over the weekend, one of our council members wrote to, I think, almost all of you and asked for a statement like this to be done. A mayor directed me to write a statement like this for this meeting. Today, I got another email that said, asked for a statement like this to be made. If you've been following our social media, we've had other people ask for city support in supporting and protecting marginalized communities. So we've kind of reached a point of a lot of input and a lot of asks. So I was directed to write a statement with council's names on it to figure out if you want to sign it or not. Other than bringing something here quickly within 12 hours of 4 or 5 different asks, that's it. That's what it was. A bunch of different community members asking for council to issue a statement of support for a variety of things. Like the one today at 2:16 asked for the city to today, do you think a message below could be read into the minutes of tonight's council meeting regarding support for LGBTQ rights and becoming a sanctuary city for anti-LGBTQ practices? So there's a lot of folks asking for the electeds, not me. I mean, I am the city administrator. People don't need me. I mean, other than they need my action, but the ask is for the electeds. And so that's what was brought and what I was directed to bring to council tonight. Now, I have no opinion about the process in which you all want to take to do this.
And if council doesn't want their name on it, then I'm happy to issue one with just my name on it as well. Councilmember Schaefer and then Councilmember McHenry.
Let's see, first of all, I think this does have a place here. Now, I haven't, tonight was the first time I heard it. I haven't wordsmithed it yet. We can improve the wording on this. Although that being said, I don't want to water the message down. I think it behooves us to make a strong statement similar to this in support of the marginalized communities that we have here. I think it's actually a very small token, that we owe the people of Duval. If the council wants to review the words there, and I think that's what you're suggesting, John, is that we get a chance to actually review the words a little bit. I'm all in favor of that. That's just fine. But again, if we choose to water the message down, then it does less good in my opinion.
Councilmember McHenry.
So first, it was almost a point of order. I just want to remind the body, no matter how heated we get, to wait your turn to talk. We don't need to get into back and forth arguments over this. We can just calm down, slow down a little bit. I have no issue with this statement. I'm fine staying signed on. I think it's a mayor's statement. You asked us if we want to sign on. I also think we could have more statements, if we also, and I agree with the reprinting, so there's not like an empty space or something like that. And if council wants to get together and put together a proposed statement, I don't think 2 statements is a bad thing. I think if there's something else that, you want to put together, and I can look at it and see if I agree and I want to sign on, or we sign on as a group. I don't see it as a one or the other, you could do both, but I think this was more, I'm assuming, not to speak for you, but it seemed like it was your statement and you're offering us the opportunity to sign on. So I wasn't sure, unless there are specific trigger words that you would want to change, but we could take time as a council. But again, that it started as like the mayor's statement. So I'm sort of assuming here that you wouldn't want to change things and we could do something different, but I just want to say I'm comfortable with it as it is, but I understand others may not be.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with the way it is. I can understand John's position, our council member John's position on this as not having an opportunity to see it before signing. And it does seem like there's a little bit of pressure to put on you when you get something in front of you for the first time. And especially around an issue that's so, I guess, in a lot of ways controversial to some people. But I'm happy with the way it is. I'm glad to sign it. And if we need to review it, I'm okay with that, but I'm happy with the way it's written now.
The only problem I would have in waiting is I think the community needs to hear from us sooner rather than later. They need that reassurance. Over the weekend, City of Olympia announced they were going to be a sanctuary city. CTAC announced there was a bunch of places that, and we're not even suggesting that we're a sanctuary city. It's just simply a statement of support. And the fact that we have quite a few, three members of our cultural commission are trans and they're in public positions. I think it behooves us to give whatever support we can. This week, they were informed that they will not be able to use public bathrooms in the airports, in public government-owned buildings. That's a huge, huge problem. And it's just not right.
I'm sorry, I think my father-in-law just passed.
Oh, no, right.
So I'm gonna go ahead and excuse myself. It wasn't unexpected, so it wasn't a huge shock. Still, I think I'm gonna go give my wife a bit of support right now.
Sorry, right.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Well, to try to recommend the path forward, like these awesome Commonwealth lawyers. Okay. Yeah. I think everyone understands where I'm coming from, and you all know me.
Yep.
This piece of paper goes, and for some reason I didn't sign it, it would be interpreted completely different. You would interpret it. So I asked that you take three ways. It's, and I asked, I don't know if we can motion to vote or what. Again, I still even worried about the legal aspect of it. Can you give me a piece of paper and say sign this? But there's only three ways on this. It's like y'all can vote on it and put it out there without my signature on it, and that's fine. That's what you want to do. But to me, I think the only two true paths forward are give us time to review it with some tweaks to some of the verbiage that still carries the message strong, but doesn't insinuate. And then I'll sign. If you don't want to do that, then you need to reprint and take my name off of it.
What does council think? This is your call. Councilmember Naplin?
I feel similarly. I feel like there's a part of it that feels that certain people will feel is politically charged in a way that can be divisive. And I think that's the opposite of what this council would want to do. And so I think that it could be written in a way that wouldn't water down the message, but would remove some of the politically charged language. And that is my.
Go ahead, and I'm going to ask the clarifying question.
So that's my request, is that potentially we look at it and remove some of the politically charged that some people would consider politically charged.
So I'm hearing, so I do want to ask council a question. What language specifically do you feel is politically charged in the statement? Especially, and I'm going to also put it in the context of we have somebody about to be confirmed as a cabinet head that said basically, essentially, white men should run everything and women shouldn't be involved on a public statement. And so when I talk about when I want to get some perspective here on what is inflammatory versus being strong worded to ensure that our community feels safe.
I need to read it again.
I would
I've only heard it verbally one time.
Okay.
You're asking me.
So
I think
I'm gonna say
irregular.
that how about hold on please. Hold on please. I'm going to Councilmember Naplin, hold on please.
You interrupted me.
I'm going to recommend that
I was speaking and you're interrupting me. And
I'm going to recommend
point of order.
Go ahead, Councilmember Naplin.
You. That's my train of thought. I think it's really unfair.
Okay, Councilmember, you're not assigning motive, please.
Let me finish.
Not
I'm not assigning motive. I'm just explaining to you that I feel like my train of thought, because you interrupted me, is difficult. I need to gather my thoughts again. It's an important topic to our community. I think it's a bit irregular. It sounds like there was a subgroup of council members that requested this.
You are assigning motive to folks, and that's not appreciated for the rest of council.
There's no motive. I'm saying there was clearly a group of council members.
There was not, Councilmember Naplin. I'm going to stop you there. You are assigning motive to the group and making assumptions. So I'd ask you to please stop.
What I'm saying is, city administrator said that I believe that there was an email that went and council members were on it and thought maybe we were all on it. I was not on it. I had no idea that this was coming forward. That is fact. I'm not saying that anyone did anything inappropriate. I'm saying this is something I didn't know about, and apparently other council members did. I did not know this was coming. I had never seen a draft. I didn't know there was any plan. I would have appreciated a heads up. An email could have been sent out. Hey, we're going to read this. Here's a chance for you to read it ahead of time. We're gonna, if anyone has any feedback, there could be a time frame. My point is, I feel completely left out of the entire situation, which I think that that's reasonable, that I would have a concern about that. And it sounds like, you know, perhaps I'm not alone. It's, you know.
Councilmember Mercer.
Yeah, and I'm just kind of coming in. I want to clarify something. That isn't what I heard in terms of the multiple people. I heard that there were multiple requests that came into the city administrator, but they weren't connected. So there was no email chain or people involved. There were requests that came in from individual council members that sort of requesting the statement, but that's not really what I specifically wanted to say. I just wanted to, that's how I interpret it. And I didn't get email, and I don't think Councilmember McHenry did based on her statement. So I just wanted to clarify that one point. I think for me, I wanted to reiterate something that Councilmember McHenry said is, I'm viewing this as the mayor's statement that we're being asked to sign on to. So the other, so I think that's optional, and I heard the mayor offer to reprint if there were people that to go with the language, and I think we have an opportunity to do a separate statement, but I also don't want to, because this is, if we classify it as the statement coming from mayor, it's her statement, and I think we can sort of agree to disagree. The only one I wanted to sort of put a little point on, I heard a number of people say that it was political. I'm here to represent the city, but this is also a political role.
Yes.
And so it inherently has politics around it. How we choose to, listen and respond, that's individual, but I did want to just sort of clarify that this is not an apolitical role. When you run for office, you're representing different viewpoints, you're soliciting and collecting lots of different viewpoints, but that also doesn't mean that as a body we don't have a political voice that we can sort of direct into at a local level, a regional level, and a national level. So that's sort of just wanted to put my stamp on that. But again, I'm also want to be really respectful that everybody comes into this with different points of views, different personal experiences, different comfort levels in terms of how you're comfortable you're being in that particular position. And I also don't want to feel pressured. So I think there were a couple mechanisms to not make it obvious that somebody didn't sign on. And I also think there's an opportunity to reinforce this as Councilmember McHenry, if we want to put out a differentiating or a clarifying statement, we can also do that as a council as well.
And I would just add, Councilmember Mercer, to what Councilmember Mercer just shared, is that for those that choose not to sign on, that's fine, totally okay. But you also have the power to write a statement and ask the clerk to share that with the community as well. So that is an option to also get your support out without necessarily signing this. That is always an option, and you're right as a council member to do so. So Councilmember McHenry.
Just to reiterate, I was CC'd on an email request from a council member to administration, but there was no verbiage in there. There was no draft. I didn't reply. There was no reply to them. I didn't know this was coming up tonight either, and it was my first time hearing it. I'm still in support of it, and I appreciate the opportunity to sign on to something that you were able to prepare in time for tonight, because I know timeliness is an essential factor here, but also everything Mayor Pro Tem just said is how I feel as well. I think especially if enough felt okay with the language that it can be one thing doing what's necessary, right, to remove empty signature lines, but totally support if you put together some language you feel is better and we can do a separate statement, and I may sign on to that as well, or you can do it as your own thing as well. Because I think, your narrative to that and your response is really important too. So, and however you would choose to word it.
Yes.
One way. You're leaving and putting with. Who's in here? These two.
Path forward Here's.
I'm resigning from city council right now, but. Really, it doesn't matter what that Ford is. I have been put in a very awkward position. So I'm done every time. Because of the position you put me in. Back in, you keep it. It's unfair that you did that.
Right, so we have the majority of council, we'll reprint it so that whoever's signatures were not on it, we will just have those signatures.
What I was going to say is one way a path forward is to read the mayor's language. He wants to mayor's message. Explain it, not be this.
I need to check that. You're trying to be inclusive of all of council. Really disappointed. And turn into person they wanted.
Want it reprinted with. Here's.
I agree.
Make an ask. Just the mayor's statement, get ready and reprint. While you're out running errands, please swing by city. If you. I've gotten them.
So, let's move on.
I was gonna say, I'm working all day tomorrow, but I can come by Thursday. Okay.
Or some of you might be able to just meet up to your office as well.
Yeah.
Yes, I can also drive you.
Okay, sweet. I'd like it.
All right, let's go ahead and move on to presentations. We have the 2024 comprehensive plan, vision statement, and overview and discussion. Director Thomas.
Just one item that's come up is our consultant has not joined the meeting, so them and are fully prepared to do the vision statement, but we'd like to ask to postpone.
It looks like we do have somebody on now.
This is Naomi. It's our consultant that hasn't showed up.
Okay.
Is it Nicole?
Yeah.
No, there's Nicole.
Oh, she did. Okay, she's.
I was gonna say, I think that Naomi went by a different name.
No, that's okay. Okay, then we're good. Thank you.
Hey, great. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. All right, I'm going to share my screen then. And oh, I need screen sharing enabled.
You should be able to share.
Okay. Oh, not yet.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, you should be able to.
All right, it works now. Okay, so here we go. So what I'm going to be presenting to you tonight is a culmination of the work that we've done together and also with the community in 2024. And this is regarding the revision of the vision statement for the comprehensive plan. And so these are the results, but since it went on periodically throughout 2024, the first thing I'll do is provide you with an overview of what has happened so far. And that's why I'm going to go over the method of what we did first. And then we'll go over briefly how we collected feedback from the community during Buval Days and other events. And then some of the feedback from the steering committee for the comprehensive plan. And then we'll go over the feedback that we got from City Council last year, as well as the Planning Commission. And then finally, the culmination, which is the vision statement that came out of all of that. So as far as the way that we approached this is that first we asked the people. So we got public feedback. We got feedback from Planning Commission during that vision statement exercise. Same thing with City Council. Then we combined all of the ideas, and then we did an analysis of all of the individual words as well as individual concepts. And then we created the final vision statement out of that so that our work was completely objective and we were just the weavers of the ideas of others. So if you remember, last year during Duval Days, we did an exercise where we asked everybody the question of what does the phrase small town mean to you? We asked them to fill out a card and attach it to the window. So here are some of the pictures from last year. There were 3 different activities. This was one of the 3. And then this was the result. I know that Laura and Cynthia probably didn't realize how much I was going to use their picture, but I really love it because they both look so happy. So I like using it. And the results were, this was out of the community feedback. The concept of community was the #1 most important thing to everyone that we spoke to. We asked people to fill out those cards too after Duval Days. We left it in the front of City Hall so people could fill out the cards and drop them off to us. So this was a culmination of all of it. The second most important concept to people was that everyone felt like they were known, that they didn't feel like they were strangers, that everybody knows each other. There's that feeling of that. And the ability to do things together as groups, the feeling of friendship and having a family and children around, so on and so forth. So the concepts in order of what was most important are listed there, the top 11. There were others too, but those were the top 11. There were 4 key points, feedback that we were given from the steering committee. I've gone through these before. And so in particular, the phrase cutting edge of technology was questionable. So that you'll find that that's no longer in the vision statement, and we'll get there in a minute. So when we did this exercise, remember we used Mentimeter. So it was an anonymous process where people were prompted with the questions, and then they were giving feedback on those questions. And one of the things I consciously chose to do was to not tell you which one of these 2 boxes comes from Planning Commission, which one comes from City Council. So you could see that generally speaking, what the community was saying was very closely reflected in the anonymous feedback that we got both from Planning Commission and City Council. And so it's very difficult to tell who contributed to each one of those cards. Now, here's another example of feedback regarding questions that we asked, very similar. And then from all of that feedback, pulling all of that together, we separated all of the raw feedback into 3 different types of ideas. And I'll explain why we did this here in a minute. So it went back to the purpose of the vision statement. Is the vision statement an activated vision statement? Does it directly guide the work of the comprehensive plan? And so when we ask a general question like, what does a small town feel like to you? What does it smell like? What does it sound like? A lot of the feedback that we got regarded how people socially engage with each other. And those are very important, but we can't regulate how people behave with each other in our comprehensive plan or in our regulations as it pertains to land use specifically. So Those are important, but we wanted to separate those out to see what type of feedback were we getting from people that really went directly to how what shape and what direction the comprehensive plan would take. So when we look at social ideas, this is a word or a phrase that focuses on people's social and emotional engagements with each other, which is really the thing that people really love about Duval. And I put in some of the phrases that were most commonly used by people. This includes feedback from city council and people in the community. A big heart, being genuine, having a sense of belonging, supporting each other's ideas, wants, and needs, being nurturing, friendly, protective, protecting, and where everyone is welcome. Now, these were some of the ideas that were programmatic. So this includes things that, yes, regulation touches upon it, but it isn't necessarily directly related to land use, but it is related to programming. So we deal with how the land is going to be used, and then we do things on that land. And that's more related to economic development, doing events like the summer concert series. And so these ideas of arts and culture and history and where everyone feels welcome, that happens in the event. So that's in the programming. And then finally, what we were digging for was what can we pull out of this sort of very instinctive, heartfelt feedback that we got from people? What can we pull out of that can be actionable ideas that we can incorporate into the plan and have that serve as the core anchor for the vision? And so some of those statements included small town sustainable growth practices, having a unique character in a natural environment. Here's a screenshot and an example of how we took the concepts from feedback that we got from everybody. And then we looked at how it's related to the different elements in our comprehensive plan and how they could be actualized so that there was a lot of depth in the meaning of the vision statement that was actionable. And so out of all of that, and we created this vision statement, and this is all words and ideas that came from everyone. And so we looked at how we could craft it so it was actionable, but also reflected the emotional and social aspect, as well as the programmatic aspect back into the vision statement in a way that it functioned. And so at this time, this is all I have to present. And I'll stop there and see if anybody has any feedback.
Thank you, Naomi. Great presentation. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or feedback for her? Councilmember McHenry.
I love the statement. It's really nice and really just captures everything so beautifully. So thank you for all the work on this.
Yeah, I also think it's in line with much of our discussion tonight. So thank you. Councilmember Mercer, and then Naplin, and then Supple.
Yeah, I was sort of also going to say, it encapsulates quite a bit in there. It'd be nice to have sort of long form, short form, like a tagline version. And I think that's still kind of encapsulated in our, our existing small town sort of real life type thing. So it's nice that they're complementary. Even, this is much more expansive, but we still, being able to, messaging is everything. A lot of this is, and I think, that we've been able to build on those, that existing, sort of encapsulated statement of the city as well. But yeah, I appreciate it. It's nice to see this all distill out into a single couple of sentences.
Councilmember Naplin, and then Supple.
I really like it. It's great. It encompasses so much of what I hear from people, and just, I remember looking at the board when you had those questions out, and I think you captured it well. My only request is people have talked a lot about valuing the history and the importance of the tribe and that indigenous heritage, but I'm wondering if there was a way that it could be wordsmithed to make sure that we also include both near history and far history. There's the indigenous heritage, but there's also you know, a really strong, you know, the Doherty farmstead. There's a lot of that history that I think is also valued. And so I'm not even sure how you would say it, but we use the word heritage kind of to describe both, but it seems like in this situation, it's been qualified to represent potentially just one. So I don't know. I don't know how we would rewrite it. I love it in so many ways, but that would be my one. Or maybe I think I'm understanding the word indigenous to refer more towards far back history or tribal, that it continues to today, obviously. But anyway, I don't know if that makes sense to anyone.
Councilmember Supple?
I like the way that's written. I appreciate the fact that you took the input from the community, input from the city council, input from the planning commission, all the inputs from all the stakeholders together to put together this vision statement. I appreciate the way you put that together.
Councilmember Kupo?
I think it's well done as well. I think having the agricultural community and our culture highlighted in there is a broad picture of the people who settled here side by side or after the indigenous heritage part is there, pretty much covers it.
Thank you. Anyone else? Great. Well, thank you so much for this presentation, Naomi, very much appreciated. And now we'll move on to our second presentation, land use element.
Is Nicole wanting to present?
Yeah, she's a presenter. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just a little bit slow getting my video to work here. Just a moment, please. You can hear me okay, I assume.
Yes.
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay. You can see one big slide, is that correct? Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, I don't think my video is working quite at the moment, but I'll keep working on that. Thank you and good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Nicole Stickney with AHBL, and we are the consultant along with our team, Transpo Group and Echo Northwest, who've been helping you with your comprehensive plan update. And so tonight, I'd like to take the opportunity to give you a quick presentation through the introduction and land use elements. The introduction chapter is going to be the first part of your comprehensive plan. That is the part that gives sort of the purpose and sets out how the plan is organized in terms of content. This will also provide an opportunity to give the historical context of planning in Duval. This is also a place where we share kind of that update process, which is so critical and such an integral part of the comprehensive planning process, as you know, to do the outreach and everything. So we outline that. And then we also provide the content and regulatory framework for planning in Washington State, just so that readers are sort of quickly oriented to that so they can understand how and why the plan is structured the way that it is. One thing that we are doing is memorializing or sort of referencing different previous updates and studies that have been ongoing at the study. We want to make sure that we're building momentum all of the time and that we're recognizing past efforts and changes. So for that reason, we list out some of these previous plans. And then, of course, we will sort of explain the the current situation with forthcoming shoreline master program update, recently adopted housing action plan, recently adopted parks, trails, open space plan, transportation plan, which will be adopted here shortly, we expect, and also the capital facilities plan, which, if I remember correctly, was adopted in December. So those types of things will all be listed out, and so that we can show those connections. Now, this quickly shows you a sort of timeline for the update process that was used in Duval to engage the community and receive public input. So this kind of shows all the different touch points that we included. Of course, our survey was a huge success. Postcards were mailed out, as you may remember. In the spring of 2024, we got a great response rate from that. And so all of these things have built together and built upon one another to really make sure that we're listening to the community and making sure that the input and desires of the community are incorporated into the plan. In terms of the framework for the plan, it's important to understand the context of the Growth Management Act. We are, of course, writing the plan to be compliant with that and being responsive to the state legal requirements. In addition to that, we're also planning within the framework of the Puget Sound Regional Council's Vision 2050 plan and King County's countywide planning policies. A few things I wanted to also emphasize here, we are incorporating the new vision statement. So that's exciting to see that that's wrapping up now, so we can make sure that we have that word for word printed out correctly in the comprehensive plan. And we're also being sure to explain the upcoming requirement for a new element, which will be added in a few years' time per the state law to this comprehensive plan, and that's for climate change and resiliency. So that's coming soon, and we are making sure that we're kind of threading that through the plan so that it's clear that that's going to emerge in a few years' time. So I've shared this graphic recently with the Planning Commission, what we have thought about, and I love how this is in one of the podcast episodes, but we can think of, and I have to credit Naomi for this, the comprehensive plan is like an octopus. There's many different parts and pieces to it. The land use element is like the head, because it is the most like, it leads the way, right? And it makes a lot of the focus point is on the land use element, because a lot of the other decisions and parts of the comprehensive plan fall in line with that. So this is maybe just a visual to give you an idea of that connection, which is so important. Okay, so now I'm going to start talking to you about the land use element. What is the purpose of the land use element? Well, of course, one of the most simple but very complex things we have to do is ensure an adequate supply of land. So we look at land capacity, and I know we've gone into some detail with you about that topic before. So that is certainly a critical piece of all of this planning work that we do. We are looking to plan on a 20-year time horizon and ensure that there is enough land in appropriate zoning for all the different uses to take place in the city. This includes things like civic and cultural uses, churches, things like that. Educational opportunities, we need to have space for that. Recreation and parks, housing, of course, and housing, as you might remember, we're taking a deeper dive now to look at housing across different densities to accommodate different income levels. You need lands for commercial uses. You need lands for other, let me think, community uses, public uses, and then of course also industrial uses. So we're trying to look at all of that balance of supply. In doing so, we also establish those land use patterns and try to direct these uses so that the city can really work well, be cohesive, be comfortable, and avoid negative impacts along the way. So of course, we try to do that through our land use map and the zoning map. And that forms the basis for the built environment. And then at the bottom here, as I've listed, we want to identify those goals and policies that provide a good framework for future decisions and actions. So these land use goals and policies are super important, and I'll talk about that in a few more slides. So I kind of went over some of the nitty-gritty basics about the land use element. Here's a little bit more just to give you an idea of what the Growth Management Act says about the land use element. It's pretty specific about all these different things that need to be incorporated and brought to bear in terms of our discussion. Additional topics that you'll find in Duval's plan is that we have included some design standards. You've already had that in the city before. That is continuing on. Those are in place to ensure that new development is consistent with community character. In Duval, you have your neighborhoods and business districts. And so we have tailored your plan, of course, to talk about those important parts of your community. We did reference the county's urban growth capacity report, which is their buildable lands analysis. That is a requirement under the Growth Management Act. And as you may recall, our analysis went a little bit further. We had to dig a little deeper into the different stratifications of affordability in terms of housing and ensure that we had sufficient lands or have a strategy for sufficient lands to accommodate all of those needs in a 20-year time frame. We also looked at potential future annexation areas in your urban growth areas, and then historical structures, arts and heritage, those are also incorporated into this plan element. Now, I just wanted to show this just for a quick second. We worked on a map. It is going to be something that can be perhaps worked on later on. It's not intended to be incorporated into the comprehensive plan, but we just wanted to let you know that we're looking at a way to come up with certain ways to characterize different parts of town and give them specific names. This could be a very useful tool in the future as you may want to proceed forward with some sub-area plans. But there was not enough time to really give this a thorough look. This is really just kind of a working draft at this point. So we do not intend to incorporate that into the final draft, but I think that you saw it in your initial draft for review. So I just wanted to explain the context of that and that this would likely be in a future work plan for the city, specifically at the Planning Commission level. I also wanted to share with regards to the urban growth areas, UGAs are established by the county. That is how it works under the Growth Management Act. We already have urban growth areas in place in Duval, and these are also known as potential annexation areas. And as that name would suggest, these are areas that are eligible to be added into the incorporation limits of the city. You might find it interesting that your last annexation occurred back in 2013, so it's been a full decade since any annexation has occurred. Annexed areas must have urban infrastructure or the ability to provide urban infrastructure. And one key factor throughout the state of Washington is sewer provision. That's really the key infrastructure piece, you know, the provision of water and of course roads and different, you know, things that we benefit from. Electricity, obviously you don't have to be within the city limits to obtain access to those amenities, but in order to connect to sewer, you do need to be within city limits. So that's an important distinction there. And what we know right now is that the potential South urban growth area is likely to be the next annexation. We did confirm in our land capacity analysis that space will be needed in order to meet all of the growth targets. So there's no immediate need to rush into bringing that in, but that is part of the long-term strategy that's expressed in this draft plan that we've been working on. Just as a reminder, going into a little more detail on the growth targets and development capacity, there is a current capacity, or at least as of the baseline year, of 1,343 housing units. We know that by 2044, we need to add 890 housing units in order to meet what King County has put forth in their documents. And so you're going to need extra land in order to do that. It's best understood by looking at our land capacity analysis, which will be included as an appendix to the comprehensive plan. But really the major shortfall is the ability to provide housing units that would be available potentially to 0 to 80% AMI earners. That's the annual median income. That's a kind of a benchmark figure that's put together by HUD every year in different regions. And as you all know, housing affordability is a major issue. Housing is very expensive, particularly in King County and in particular in Duval. And so they have asked the cities to come up with strategies so that more diverse housing types can be accommodated, more compact housing can be built, meaning higher density, in hopes that that will then be more attainable to different income levels. The other emphasis that I like to make with this is that also increasing supply is also intended to help because it will just add more units that are available and hopefully take a little bit of the pressure off of the market conditions that are also escalating costs. So there is a big drive to keep building houses out there and provide for those unmet needs right now. And then the bottom line in terms of jobs was that the land capacity analysis found that there's a need for about 13 to 17 acres of land that would be in the commercial, light industrial, or mixed use categories in order to accommodate those jobs. We do like to provide a range because it really depends on what types of employment is introduced in the city, what types of companies or producers, businesses come to town. It really can range greatly from one economic type to another in terms of land consumption or even square footage per job ratio. So that's why it's expressed as a range. All right, you will also have seen in this element a new future land use map that we've proposed. Right now on the screen, I'm sharing with you the future land use map that was adopted and pursuant to Resolution 2117. So it's your current future land use map, or FLUME. Now, this does look different than any version of this map you may have seen before because we have for convenience sake, change some of the colors to align with what we propose to use in our updated map. And we've also added in the roads, the parcels, things like that, so that it's showing the same information kind of projected, if you will, on a screen that shows the best available parcel data and stuff like that. So as I go to the next slide, now you'll see what the proposed map looks like. So a few key changes I want to call out very quickly. We are looking at changing the colors for accessibility. We're looking at high contrast colors. We're not using colors that have lines going through them, or I should say a stylistic approach to that. Everything's just a solid color. So that's an improvement there. I also want to call out that we're proposing a new category, manufactured home park, and that is intended to recognize those areas that are already built out with those land uses in place. And by doing so, we think this is a good approach to help preserve those opportunities in town so that there isn't that outward pressure for redevelopment. So it's really intended to help prevent displacement of folks.
We have a question here, Councilmember Neplin, briefly.
Yes, thanks for interrupting me. Go ahead.
Thanks. I was actually looking for a slide that had a proposed future land use in the packet, and I don't know, I don't see that. Was it in the one that was put in the packet? Because I was just hoping I could zoom in while you were talking about it, and I don't
It should be there. And in addition, we have provided this online with a sliding tool so that you can compare before and after.
But it's not that one.
There's different slides. We have 27 slides and that's 30 slides.
Yeah. So we're missing a couple slides.
Oh, I see. Okay, some slides didn't make it to your packet, so we'll remedy that. This should also be in the plan itself, the draft document that you would have received. All right, and then I also just wanted to mention, and I'm going to scroll back real quick, instead of having multiple different land use designations and then further there's different zoning designations that implement them, it is possible to streamline them a little bit, and we're proposing to do that. Just really differentiating between residential traditional, this is the name that we came up with, which would be 4 to 8 units per acre, and then a residential compact category, which would be 12 to 20 units per acre. Now, the idea with the residential transitional areas is that that's the areas that have pretty much already been built out for the most part in the city. And what you can try to do is allow for more compact development. There's no minimum density that I recall right now from the Duval Municipal Code, but the idea is to allow for more density. And then now I'm going to go through a couple more slides, and I apologize if these didn't make it into your packet. These show, and this is the same information that's in the draft plan. This shows the different categories and then how they translate to zoning designations. One benefit of having fewer designations on your land use map is that, excuse me, your FLUME, your future land use map, is that if somebody wants to change zoning and come in for a rezone application, if they're going from one land use category to another, their opportunities are really limited because you can only do comprehensive plan changes once per year through your docketing process. Now, if we consolidate it a little bit on the land use map and make it a little easier for folks to move between different zoning districts and get entitlement for different projects, you might actually see that that will be helpful to your developers in town and property owners who just want more opportunities for different, for flexibility, if you will. So that last piece was just showing you the residential component, and this is all the other categories all on one slide. But this brings you through everything from commercial to public facilities, public and open space, and so forth. And we just want to make it very clear which designations, how they work for density, and then how they also density if there's housing included, and then how they also relate to a corresponding or implementing zoning district. So that way it can be easily understood, those relationships between the land use map and the zoning map. All right, so next I'm going to present some of the goals and policy changes that we're proposing for the land use element. First, I wanted to just explain very quickly a key concept here. With some of the I think it's all of the other elements in the comprehensive plan for Duval, we're proposing a relationship between goals and policies where you have different goals and different policies that are nested under them. That's illustrated here on this slide. So you might have 4 different goals and you have a set of policies, and the policies are listed under the goal that they make sense with, that they are thematically related to, which is great. But for our land use element, we kind of wanted to take a little bit of a different approach because that element is so unique and there are so many different objectives kind of pulled together. So the question was, well, what if you had a lot of redundancy? What if you had some goals over here under, or some policies, excuse me, under goal C, and they're really redundant with maybe a policy that's under goal B? How can we do things a little better or present them in a better way, more innovative way? So the idea was to identify those redundancies and kind of resort. So instead of having one-to-one relationship between goals and policies, we could refine the policies into a shorter list and show that one-to-many relationship between goals and policies. So as you can see in this graphic, you would still have 4 goals, but one goal may relate to several different policies, and that's fine. And so we would just recognize that as so. So when you're reading through the element, you'll see that there's a list of goals all at the beginning, and then there are policies listed subsequent to that. They are still also arranged thematically, just to help group them. That made good sense. But the idea is that there isn't just a distinct or specific group of policies for each goal. Instead, it's meant to represent this different relationship and be more innovative. So with that being said, I also just wanted to remind you that there are different ways that policies can relate to a goal. So policies, when we're implementing them moving forward, because this plan is meant to be a living document and something that's hopefully very useful and drives decisions and choices made by the city down the road, we want to emphasize that policies can relate to a lot of different choices. That could be in the arenas of city programming. Permitting, of course, is a huge part of all of this, especially talking about land use. Your code language. So when you look at how you develop your municipal code around, you want to look at the policies that are foundational to it. And then maybe even budget directions and budget choices, how the money is spent, where you put resources. So that's just something to really maybe give some consideration to and think about as you contemplate these. Okay, here's the other twist. The other interconnected relationship that we want to make sure that we emphasize and provide for the reader of the comprehensive plan is the relationship between these different elements. And this will help us reduce redundancy as well. So the idea is that when we have a specific policy, and we've got one written here, we would show, kind of using a grid approach, the other elements that are in the comprehensive plan and let you know if it applies. So we're going to use this iconography approach to be very clear, if it does or doesn't relate, kind of spark a connection to another element, and we'll be using that approach. So kind of trying to remember the approach used with the housing action plan with a lot of iconography and leverage that, which just will also enhance the graphics and the visual appeal of the plan and hopefully make it that much more meaningful. Okay, without further ado, I'll run through a couple of slides if it's all right, looking at the goals and policies now. And this is just a curated list. It would take me a long time to go through all of them, but so we wanted to give you kind of the high points here. And on this slide, I should also mention, these are all paraphrased. So in terms of existing land use goals in your current plan, as you may recall, it says to preserve, maintain, and enhance your small town character, support Old Town as a public destination with a historic character, ensure that your building and site design align with adopted plans, encourage mixed-use development, allow for multiple housing types. Yes, you've already had that in your plan, and enable opportunities for development and redevelopment. Provide a connectivity between destinations. That doesn't just mean roads, that can also mean trails and sidewalks. Foster community through the arts, engagement, historic preservation, and so forth. Be a tourist destination. Ensure that your annexations are consistent with existing land use and don't negatively impact city finances in the bottom line. And then finally, showcase and preserve the natural beauty in and around Duval. So this is sort of where we were starting from, and just wanted to bring these up in case you need a refresher, or maybe you just haven't been familiar with this before. So here's a few proposed new goals that we want to bring to you. actually, there's just this one. It says develop and maintain land use patterns that protect natural systems and foster a diverse, connected, and sustainable environment where residents and visitors alike can thrive. So that's going to be a good overarching sort of direction, kind of giving you that vector of where you want to go. And then we have additionally proposed some adjustments to your existing goals for clarity and also incorporating some additional items that need to be added in, such as equity and inclusivity themes, and also tuning them up to better relate to what we heard during the community engagement. Next, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the goals and policies for your organization. So as I mentioned, the policies are organized by topic, and each one could apply to one or many goals. And so these are those broad categories that we're using to organize them by. I won't read through this list, but you can see it's pretty comprehensive here. Covers all the bases. And now I'm going to talk through a couple of the new proposed policies. Some of these come from, a lot of them come from multiple sources. I'll start out by saying that. But key considerations were, what do we have to incorporate based on legislative changes at the state level? So new regulations, changes to the Growth Management Act. Next, we looked at requirements of policies that came from regional and countywide documents. So that includes the Puget Sound Regional Council Vision 2050 plan, and that has a regional growth strategy incorporated with that. And then also the King County countywide planning policies, which I would say are very extensive and very specific. So that was no small effort. Okay, so that being said, and then of course, as I mentioned before, public engagement and just your local needs, that all fit in with this. So land use, goal one, with our land use one, citywide policies. The first one I want to read to you here is encourage land use decision-making in accordance with the public interest and applicable Washington state laws, including the Local Project Review Act, and while protecting the general health, safety, and welfare of Duval residents. So that was just kind of putting a little structure in because that was maybe a little bit of a missing or kind of maybe a little gray area. So we wanted to be very clear about that. Next, administer the city zoning map to implement the future land use map directives in the comprehensive plan. Ensuring compatibility, that's a key word there, among uses and adequate buffers or transitions between zones. And then additionally establish development agreements for alternative development standards where applicable. So this is truncated a little bit, but the idea is that development agreements can be used as an additional tool. Next, provide incentives such as density bonuses, or relief from specific requirements, typically parking, in order to encourage challenging projects, particularly affordable housing. So that links in with some of the goals I was talking about earlier, objectives that we have. The next one is about using urban design standards for architecture and site design. And this really matches up with pretty much how you're approaching things now in terms of those design standards. We just want to be very clear as to the parameters on that. And the last part here is addressing signage specifically. One thing that's important in terms of a not so recent anymore, but still fairly new Supreme Court case has to do with free speech principles. And so there are limitations in how you can regulate your signage in town. So we wanted to make sure that we incorporate that. Okay, I'm going to move on now to preservation of community character. So one policy here for that is to prioritize services and expand access opportunities for persons of color, low-income individuals, and historically underserved communities, with the idea of ensuring equitable access to resources that improve quality of life and address long-standing inequities. And next, consider form-based regs and other alternatives to the traditional zoning methods in order to promote more flexible and responsive land use planning. So it sort of opens that window or that door for doing form-based planning in the future. So those are the two I had to I wanted to mention under land use 2. Next, land use category 4, that has to do with building and site design consistency. I have 3 new proposed policies for you there. The first is to support a land use vision consistent with all these things I've been talking about. Next, accommodate an adopted growth target for housing units and jobs. And then encourage landscape buffers between incompatible development types. So you may see we're trying to put in some language to be more specific in our policies about some of these mandates and these requirements so that they are stated explicitly.
Ms. Stickney, we have a question from Councilmember Naplan.
Yes, please.
It's on the prior slide.
It's on the former slide. Okay. Yep.
One slide back. Yeah. Okay. So LU 4.5, it seems like a bit of a revision from what had been there before, where it talks about non-similar residential to make sure you have buffers between non-similar residential. And so this has been rewritten, it looks like, incompatible development types. And so, trying to create buffers between, super high density to, low density existing, or commercial and residential, things like that. But I guess I don't know that there's really a definition of what it means to be incompatible. And so I just wasn't sure, are you talking about the same thing? Should there be a definition to describe what incompatible, because it really feels somewhat like a term that could be subject to, just kind of your own opinion of what you consider incompatible. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I do. Thank you for the question. There's actually a short section that we've added to the land use element in terms of narrative, talking about compatibility between land use types. And typically the key thing that you want to think about is the impacts that can be observed from one property to another. And this is really context-based because it can look very different in different communities. But I would say that in Duval, some of the concerns you might have is noise, traffic, light, trespass, things like that. So that's where these landscape buffers can really help. So that's why it's and I think the intent here is to sort of broaden it also. You had mentioned that it was previously speaking pretty specifically to residential development, abutting other residential development that has different densities, but we want to be broader because this could also be very important for say a mixed use area abutting a residential use, or even industrial against maybe most anything else.
So this isn't intended for us to remove some of that in our code about putting buffers in between different densities. If we have things already in our code, it's not pulling back from what was there before. It's really just broadening.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yes, absolutely. And probably bolstering what's already there in your code too.
Okay.
And I did do that exercise of going through your code and looking to see what policies kind of where are they? Are we being expressive to these different needs? Are we addressing them in our comprehensive plan sufficiently to defend what we have in the municipal code? Because you always want to make sure that your code is really implementing your comprehensive plan. So we wanted to be able to draw that those connections where needed.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilmember McHenry.
Do I need to make it, since we're 2 minutes before 9,
We do need a motion to go over, but hopefully looks like we've only got 2 slides left. So
I'll go ahead and just move to extend the meeting past 9 p.m.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion passes. Go for it, Ms. Stickney.
Thank you. Yes, and we are coming towards the end here. There is a mixed-use development theme, and so we've reorganized a lot of policies, retooled them or wordsmith them. But again, I'm showing you kind of the newbies here. And then the newbie under this category is to continue evaluating the housing needs of Duval in accordance with the regional growth strategy and encourage development that reflects these goals. And this is my last slide. A topic I really love, economic development. There's 3 new proposed policies under that umbrella. First, support the establishment of regionally significant facilities that provide substantial public benefits and contribute to the diversification of Duval's economy. Support existing businesses to prevent business displacement during market changes, growth, and development. So this is, kind of about keeping the local character as much as you can. Your local mom and pop shops that you want to see continue to thrive and be a part of your community. And then finally, encourage inclusive community involvement and volunteerism in general, as well as specifically regarding land use decisions to ensure that marginalized communities are not disproportionately impacted by these processes. And that concludes my slides, and I'm happy to take any more questions or hear any more discussion on this. Thank you very much.
Council have any more questions or discussion this evening? Not seeing any, thank you so much, Ms. Dickey, for that wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
And with that, there is no further business unless there are objections. We are adjourned at 9 p.m. So I guess we didn't need the motion after all.